couldn't have seen this Pokemon. Trainers have searched their whole lives and never seen it.
Ash would go on to encounter every single legendary Pokemon in existence. Welcome to Frame by Frame. Today's topic, Pokemon the Indigo League. A pair of video games hit the shelves in Japan back in 1996. Pokemon Red and Green became a huge hit that would eventually expand to produce sequels, spin-offs, card games, and let's not forget, of course, an animated series spanning over 1,200 episodes, 23 movies, and so many specials that Pikachu has used up more vacation days than I have, and that should upset you. Support me in the work I do instead of taking time off by giving this video a like and a share. Preferably a share because sharing is caring. Since Pokemon is so big, I'll be breaking up my analysis by doing each region separately, starting with Kanto's Indigo League. But first, a bit of background as to why I bothered to subject myself to this hell of an idea. Well, back when the Masters 8 tournament was still airing, I made a bet with the people on our Discord. Short version is that there were 3 items in the bet, and for each one I lost, I would receive a penalty. Basically, the more I lost, the more Pokemon I had to watch. The 3 bets? First was Ash would beat Leon. You all know how that one turned out. Second was that Ash would retire from the series and we'd get a new main character. Look, obviously I was wrong, but there was no way I could have known ahead of time they'd actually go through with it. That said, I'm glad we got Pokemon Horizon, so I'll happily take my penalty. Finally, for item 3, Ash ends up with Serena. Yeah, that was a pipe dream. Look, if I had to map out the actual timeline of Pokemon, then I wanted it to be worth it. Right, so I lost 2 out of 3, meaning that I have to watch every single episode, movie, special, what have you. So I may as well take advantage of the opportunity to make a video or 2 from the adventure, because I sure don't want to go through 1,200 episodes ever again. At the rate I've been going, it already looks like it's going to take a decade before we're at the end. I say we because I've turned this into a weekly watch party for anyone in our Discord who wants to sit in. You should join our Discord if that is at all something you want to subject yourself to. Pokemon was probably the first anime that my generation of nerds ever watched, before we even knew what anime was. Obviously, the stylistic differences between it and Western cartoons sparked an interest because it was insanely popular. Let's be honest, finding someone who hasn't at least heard of Pokemon by this point would prove to be a challenge. Of course, Western viewers like myself got the series 2 years late. More importantly, we got the show about 3 weeks before the games came out. This might not seem like a lot at first, but remember, back in the day, shows like Pokemon aired 5 new episodes a week. By the time we could buy Red and Blue, Ash had already gotten his 3rd badge. Weirdly enough, the first episode that aired wasn't even really the first episode, it was the St. Anne episode, which ends with the ship sinking and the group going down with it. The original broadcast version of the episode even ends with the narrator stating that we'll be going back to the beginning of this series in the next episode, i.e. the actual first episode titled Pokemon I Choose You. We begin with an homage to the Game Boy games before introducing our main character, Ash Ketchum. When children reach a certain age, they are sent off to Professor Oak to obtain their first Pokemon. You might wonder why that's the case when there are younger kids who clearly have Pokemon on their own, but we'll just say that depends on where you live. Ash's mom addresses the concern that it's way past his bedtime, and yes, of course I'm going to point this out, Ash and his mom are both voiced by Veronica Taylor. In truth, we'll find that a lot of voice actors get reused throughout the series, to the point where it makes for a good drinking game. Of course, Ash ends up sleeping in and he arrives late to Oak's lab. We then meet Gary Oak, Ash's long-term rival, at least I think. We don't really get a lot of information about the characters before this point. Gary's already grabbed his starter Pokemon, so he simply drops a diss at Ash before taking off. Accompanying him to his car are a group of cheerleaders. Why does Gary have a group of cheerleaders? Well, according to Takeshi Shudo's novel, Gary's uncle is the mayor and paid a bunch of middle school girls to follow him around. Do with that information what you will. Ash prepares to pick his own starter, and Oak is just a glorious asshole, proceeding to have Ash open all 3 empty Pokeballs one at a time, leaving Ash distraught that he really did miss his chance to get a Pokemon. However, Oak has one more Pokemon that he can give Ash, a Pikachu. A very angry Pikachu that is prone to shock anyone that ticks it off. Again, a glorious asshole, just like his grandson. Determined to become a trainer no matter what, Ash decides to settle with Pikachu and sets off on his journey. Pikachu refuses to get in its Ash Pokeball, meaning that Ash has to drag it around by a cord as he makes his way to Viridian City. It also won't listen to a single thing Ash says. So when Ash finally encounters some wild Pokemon, he has to take the Safari Zone approach. We also get a chance to see Ash's Pokedex for the first time, called Dexter, and I gotta say, I wish they kept up its snarky attitude throughout the show.
It also comes out into open fields to steal food from stupid travelers.
Ash ticks off a flock of Spearow, causing them to attack him and Pikachu. His attempts to protect Pikachu is what finally leads it to start trusting Ash as it charges in to deliver an incredibly powerful thunder attack on the flock of Spearow. And so we end our pilot with Ash carrying a near-dead Pokemon into the city, hoping to reach a Pokemon Center before anything else tries to battle him. A situation I believe we've all found ourselves in one time or another. The pilot episode does a good job of checking off a bunch of boxes, introducing our main character, some basic concepts of the Pokemon world, and we end on a dramatic fight that leaves us with a cliffhanger. Speaking of cliffhangers, rare for a kids show. Part of its popularity in the West might have been just due to how different it was from a typical cartoon. Pokemon may have been kid-friendly, but it was also packed with thrilling moments and more depth to its animation than characters. As for the opening theme, let's be real for a second. There is not a single person on the planet who hasn't heard "Gotta Catch 'Em All" at least once in their life. It's a banger. It's notable for kicking off the YouTube career of Smosh, and all they did was lip sync to it. One of my favorite parts is where Gary pops up. In a world we must defend. As if Gary himself is someone that we need to defend the world against. It was a blast hearing the old theme again. We sang along with all the enthusiasm of our inner children for about 20 episodes before finally getting bored again. Yeah, after 80 episodes, I think I'm ready for something new. Overall, probably one of my top 5 favorite Pokemon songs. I'd sing that in a party. Moving along, Ash encounters Officer Jenny. Sorry, I had something disgusting in my mouth just now. Immediately, she suspects him of stealing Pokemon. No, Jenny, he's covered in dirt. He's not actually... Anyways, Ash is able to identify himself with his Pokedex, so Jenny drives him to the nearest Pokemon Center. It's here we get a glimpse of the best trio of characters in the entire franchise, Team Rocket. Despite the comic relief they turn into later on, their presence in this episode is pretty heavy. Their wanted posters are hung up, they're layered in darkness, and they have a talking Pokemon, and that's just completely unnatural. Oh, side note, for early episodes, James and Meowth have different voice actors. James is voiced by Ted Lewis, who moves on to play Giovanni, as well as Tracy, Sketchet, and some other people. Meowth is voiced by Nathan Price, who didn't end up playing any other major roles, as he ended up focusing more on the live-action acting after departing from the role. Officer Jenny crashes her bike into the lobby of the Pokemon Center, because she lacks concern for the public. Ash is finally able to leave Pikachu with the nurse, appropriately named Nurse Joy. Before Ash can get any rest though, someone else appears at the lobby to scold him. Yep, this is Misty. She was actually in the first episode, but only barely, so I just kinda glossed over it. Basically, she's pissed at him for breaking her bike. Team Rocket make their grand appearance, dropping Pokeballs through the glass ceiling to release a coughing smoke screen. Oh, and speaking of Team Rocket, Jessie and Misty are both played by Rachel Lillis. Bless her heart. If that one shocks you, wait till James gets replaced. Team Rocket declares their plan to steal the Pokemon in recovery. Misty tries to hold them off by sending out her Goldeen, and then immediately calling it back. Misty, what are you doing? Ash manages to reach Pikachu, and together they get the idea to supercharge it using the aforementioned bike along with a bunch of other Pikachu. Not sure of the logistics of that one, but it works. Pikachu delivers yet another powerful thunder attack which blows Team Rocket away. Team Rocket's first blast-off is the result of 100 Pikachus. They naturally decide that it was the one Pikachu that did it all, and therefore proclaim that they must steal that Pikachu! Wanting a replacement bike from Ash, Misty takes along with him into the Viridian Forest, where he encounters and catches his first Pokemon, Caterpie. Now that we have Misty, an actual competent trainer around, we have someone to explain basic shit to Ash, like type advantage. Of course, Ash is an arrogant little shit and often ignores any free advice his allies give him. Despite his incompetencies, he still manages to pick up a Pidgeotto. Progressing through the forest, Caterpie goes through 2 evolutions, once into Metapod and then Butterfree. Evolution is probably the thing that pulled me in the most as a kid. It's something I feel like we take for granted as one of the many cool things about Pokemon, mostly because it's so common now. Example, let me ask you this. Which Pokemon would you prefer? Skarmory, a steel-flying Pokemon, or Rookidee, which eventually becomes, you guessed it, Corviknight, also a steel-flying Pokemon, but this one's a 3rd stage evolution. You'd pick the Corviknight, right? Right? No? Some of you are saying no? Oh, okay, well, maybe I should remind you about G-Max Corviknight! Ravage! As Ash heads to Pewter City for his first gym battle, Team Rocket also tries something for the first time, digging a pitfall trap, something which they immediately get caught in. Surely they'll never try something like that again. During Ash's rematch against Brock, his Pidgeotto gets beaten off screen. Seriously, Geodude was barely hitting the thing, but we cut away for 1 second and suddenly it managed to KO his bird. You might assume it's because Rock is super effective against flying. Counter argument? Yeah, early Pokemon follows the rules about as much as early Yu-Gi-Oh!
Catapult Turtle! What I'm attacking is the castle.
It's not a thing, you can't do that! Ash ends up getting his first gym badge from Brock, although he didn't technically win, and so Brock joins Ash on his journey. For some reason, it's not really explained. On their way to the next town, they stop by Mount Moon. Brock catches a Zubat off screen and they meet a wacky professor who claims that some Pokemon are aliens. Something that later actually turns out to be true. See Deoxys. By this point, Team Rocket has already started to settle into the role of just doing evil things in the spur of the moment, like capturing the Moonstones in the cave. Misty shows off her Staryu for the first time. Hey, Misty, where was that Staryu the last 4 times you fought Team Rocket? When the group gets to Cerulean City, we find out that Misty is actually the de facto gym leader. Well, Ash does. Brock f***ed off somewhere. He's not in this episode.
I have some stuff I need to check out.
What stuff?
Just stuff. See you later.
The battle would be worth talking about if not for the fact that Misty's sisters ending up giving Ash his second badge just out of thanks for beating Team Rocket for the 5th time! Gifting him the badge implies it was a sympathy gift, which is stupid because from where I was standing, Ishii had Misty beat dead to rights. And that was without using Pikachu. Treating it like he wouldn't have earned the badge otherwise is kind of dumb and unnecessary. However, there is a secret narrative point to it. We'll get to that later. Next is the AJ episode. Some would call this filler. I call this the episode where Ash gets to see what life would be like if he was a competent trainer. Say what you will about AJ's camp. He's basically Eevee training his Pokemon, so you're no better. Also, look at him. He's just a cooler Ash. Like, that's just Ash's face. It was really funny when Ash tried to lead AJ's Pokemon to a revolution only to be ignored. Like, really shows Ash's lack of, well, everything, really. Speaking of skill, the next stop is Pokemon School, where we finally get to pretend that the anime is like the video game, talking about levels and type advantages and all that wonderful technical BS. Now let's forget all that and one-shot a Weeping Bell with Water Gun. I would comment on how strong Starmie must be to pull that off, but yeah, Starmie doesn't have a great track record otherwise. A few voice acting tidbits. Misty's voice actress, Rachel Lewis, had to record some Pikachu's lines around this time because the recordings they received from Japan got corrupted, so they couldn't use them. Eric Stewart finally took over voicing James, meaning that now both members of Team Rocket are voiced by Ash's companions. From here, we finally get to the interesting episodes. For starters, the starters! Ash picks up Bulbasaur, Charmander, and Squirtle, each coming with their own backstory. And that was a very cool, if not brilliant, idea to both buff up his team and just get his kids excited. We also see one of Brock's first interactions with a girl, the one taking care of Bulbasaur.
And did you steal the promise with a kiss? Oh!
No, Misty, you're gonna turn Brock into Brock. Regarding Charmander's original trainer, not only is he the grade A asshole we all remember him being, this motherfucker has 20 Pokemon with him when you're only allowed to hold 6 at a time. I'm calling hacks! No, that rule hasn't been established.
Looks like Route 24 leads right to Vermilion City.
No, it doesn't. Route 24 leads to Route 25, which is a dead end, and I've never understood why that is. That's nothing compared to the Squirtle episode, which, my god, do I have a lot of complaints about the Squirtle episode. First of all, 5 different trainers abandoned their Squirtles. What? That's so stupid considering how rare they're supposed to be. Somehow, these mischievous little f***s managed to prepare a pitfall trap right behind Team Rocket without any of them noticing. At one point, the gang gets soaked by the Squirtles near a lake, so obviously they get hit by Pikachu's Thunder Shock, but that doesn't explain how the Squirtles who were in the lake avoided any damage, despite being the target of the attack. How are damp clothes more conductive than an actual pool of water? And worst of all, the excessive use of guns in this episode. No, not Team Rocket's guns. Those were all bluffs. I'm talking about the entire shop of townsfolk who pulled out actual shotguns and pointed them at the 10-year-old. What? Back to Team Rocket, we show them using flash grenades against the Pokemon wearing the sunglasses. Really? Actually, I take it back. Those are the most destructive flash grenades I think I've ever seen. But whatever. Ash has a team of 6 now. Soon to be 7 as he captures a Krabby using nothing but a stick. We then meet Bill, the famous Pokemon researcher, who we'll never see again after this episode, and I'm glad that's the case. Bill gets a lot of things wrong despite being a researcher, such as Dragonite's size and the idea that Dragonite is somehow a one-of-a-kind Pokemon. I wonder if there's a way to see how many Dragonites appear in the anime. Oh look, Drake's Dragonite! Oh look, Lance's Dragonite! Oh look, Iris's Dragonite! Oh look, Ash's Dragonite!
Do you think we'll ever find all the Pokemon there are?
No, Ash. There are probably as many as we can imagine.
That sentence rings far too true given the current state of the Pokedex. With that out of the way, the group immediately teleports to Vermilion City, where Ash can have his 3rd gym battle. Continuity with how stone evolutions work, we get to see that Raichu actually does lose to Pikachu, specifically because it evolved too early and didn't learn any speed moves. This ends up being Ash's first legitimate and uncontestedly earned gym badge. And rightfully so. Even a disguised Team Rocket were cheering him on this time.
Bye, Team Rocket!
And they never recognized Team Rocket again. We're now at the previously mentioned first episode released in the West, which turns out to be a 3-part story that I like to call the St. Anne arc. I mean, nothing of significance actually happens during these episodes, but a 3-part story wasn't really common back in the day, so it was exciting. Ash and friends get tickets to the St. Anne, which turns out to be a ploy by Team Rocket to steal Pokemon. I mean the whole Team Rocket too. This was like a fully fleshed out scheme by the organization. If not for this, you'd think Jesse and James and Meowth were the only members of Team Rocket. A lot happens in a short time too. We get a glimpse of Team Rocket's boss. Ash trades his Butterfree for Eradicate and then trades it right back. Touch trade. And of course, the establishment of a long-running gang. James falls for a Magikarp pyramid scheme. So Team Rocket tries to steal Pokemon by sucking them up. Would love to know the mechanics that cause all the Pokeballs and only the Pokeballs to get sucked into those tubes, but this only lasts, of course, until everyone realizes that they can just release their Pokemon and swarm the shit out of Team Rocket, or in the case of the gang of Butterfree, stun spore the shit out of everyone! Which is what should have happened. It didn't, but it should have, because that's how air circulation works. None of that matters though, because the battle causes the ship to start sinking. Ash's gang and Team Rocket end up the only ones unable to evacuate.
Ash, Misty, Brock, Jesse, and James. It makes all of us sad to think that these young Pokemon trainers
And 2 criminals.
have had their promising careers cut tragically short.
Wait, how did you know about Jesse and James? Team Rocket wasn't even supposed to be there. Imagine that this was your first introduction to Pokemon. Titanic. I mean, not Titanic. Titanic hadn't come out yet, but you see my point. Ash wakes up at the ship to see regular-ass fish swimming outside.
Pikachu, I don't think we're in Pokemon Land anymore.
They start to look for a way off the ship. Brock establishes that Noah's Ark, or at least the story of Noah's Ark, canonically exists in the Pokemon universe. James's voice actor starts settling into the James tendencies, for lack of a better word.
We've got to abandon ship immediately! Oh, the ship sunk, we're doomed! Jesse and Meowth, you go ahead! I'm staying here!
James!
I'll always remember what a wonderful dresser you were.
So will I!
In part 3, an attack from a horde of Gyarados leave the gang stranded on the island, separated from some of their Pokemon. It's here that we learn that Jessie got Ekans for her birthday and James got his coughing for Christmas. And I'm only just now thinking, what sort of message does it send when these are the Pokemon you're giving your children? Especially poison types. On this island, we see some giant Pokemon, including a Moltres and a Zapdos. Not that the characters know what those are, they're legendaries after all, which is something I liked about earlier Pokemon. Legendaries were given this rare and mysterious vibe, blocking part of its appearance. Furthermore, people weren't even really sure what they were called. Compared to now, where every legendary is known and they aren't obscured in any way. Of course, these giant Pokemon aren't real, they're machines, which takes the group as long as breaking them into pieces to actually figure out. Yeah, it turns out they actually landed on a theme park. Run by Team Rocket's boss, no less. And they're financially ruining Giovanni one project at a time. The next batch of episodes are weird. We have the notorious Beauty and the Beach episode. This was originally banned due to James's cross-dressing. However, they did in fact air a censored version twice on Kids WB. Once on June 24th and once on August 18th during the year 2000. And then it's never seen again, not even in current rosters of the show. We have the Tentacle episode, which aired as normal, but then got temporarily banned due to the events of 9/11. As you might suspect, tracking the episode count starts to get kind of tricky based on whether or not these episodes were included. But don't worry, it gets worse. The Beach episode is actually the debut of the coveted Gyarados sub, almost almost as if a direct result of the Gyarados attack from the St. Anarch. Ash's group manages to accidentally steal a boat somehow. I don't know how you do that. And we get reintroduced to Gary's grandpa, accompanied by Delia. Hang on, that sounds off. Here we get reintroduced to Ash's mom, accompanied by Professor Oak? We also get introduced to an old woman named Nestina, who ends up working with Team Rocket this episode. I point this out because in the Tentacle episode, we meet her twin sister, and it's only at the end you actually see them both together, something that would strike confusion in a lot of people if they hadn't seen Beauty and the Beach. Honestly, these episodes are pretty much filler, but I found their background interesting enough to talk about. The next batch of episodes are far more interesting. First, Brock and James get obsessed over the same girl, which is hilarious since it means that Eric Stewart is essentially hugging himself in the shot. Of course, this ends up being an illusion created by a talking Ghastly. This is where Brock starts to become the girl chaser that we're used to, and you know what? I don't blame him. Brock would go over the deep end for a rock-shaped woman.
A rock is a rock, Brock.
Put your hands together.
It was at this point that I think I first realized I really hate Officer Jenny. Like, she is kind of incompetent.
I'm with the local police department, and I know exactly what you're all doing.
Well, duh, they're wearing Team Rocket uniforms. Obviously, they're planning to steal Pokemon.
I see you found some change that someone dropped.
You being serious right now? Wait, what was I talking about? Alright, Ghastly. Ghastly invented Pokemon fusions. That's right, long before you had this fusion, or this fusion, or this fusion, you had this!
I'll combine them into one super Pokemon to make Venustoise.
Now, is Venustoise the grandfather of all eventual Pokemon fusions that we as fans created? Based on my research, no. No, it is not. Pokemon Fusion Generator wasn't created until 2012, and up until then, there had been little to no interest in the idea. Still, gotta give Ghastly credit for being ahead of the times, even if it did make an outdated Cutie Honey reference in the same episode.
Sometimes I'm the ghost of the 2,000-year-old maiden.
And sometimes I'm the mysterious old woman.
Of course, we're now at the episode everyone's been dreading. The saddest, most emotional episode in the entire first generation of Pokemon. Bye Bye Butterfree. It was okay. I don't know why, but I felt like this episode was built up to be this big thing, but like, Ash barely used Butterfree since he got it. He didn't use it against Brock, he didn't use it against Surge, he used it once on Misty, and beyond that, I can barely remember him using it at all. Not that Butterfree is a bad Pokemon, it's not. It's a third stage evolution with access to psychic moves and status powders. I know it's supposed to be a big deal because it's the first Pokemon he caught, but like, it was only a few episodes ago he traded it away for a goddamn Raticate. Yeah, he took it back, but he hasn't used it since then. He's already trying to get rid of it again. And yet, despite all this, I still remember it being actually sad when I watched this as a kid. But now it just feels like fabricated emotion. In any event, all that really happens in this episode is that it's Butterfree mating season. So Ash releases his Butterfree so he can fly off with a pink, not shiny, pink Butterfree, after which we never see them again. Until the last episode journeys. For one shot. The end of the episode. Jeez, I can't imagine any of Ash's other Pokemon getting shafted this hard. Anyways, it's been a while since Ash got a badge, so we finally make it to Saffron City. Yes, Saffron, not Celadon, Saffron. Ash is going in underleveled for this next fight, and it's gonna show hard. The gym leader, Sabrina, uses a very OP Kadabra to curb stomp Pikachu. So Ash has to go find a Ghost Pokemon for the rematch, as Ghost is a Psychic Pokemon's only weakness.
So that was a fucking lie.
You want to tell them or should I? I'll tell them. Gen 1 Psychic Pokemon had no weakness. Ghost was normal effective, Dark didn't exist, Bug move sucked, Psychic Pokemon were so overpowered. And so they immediately head next door to Lavender Town. Yep, just no time in between, instantly there. Despite taking reportedly 2 weeks to get from Cerulean to Vermilion.
Right, Pikachu? Charmander?
Oh hey, early signs of Charmander being a disobedient prick. Of course, there are ghost Pokemon here, ready and willing to prank the shit out of Ash. Good prank, bro. Yeah, this is one of those rare instances where Ash straight up dies in the series. I shouldn't say rare instances. This should not happen as much as it does. In this particular case, Ash and Pikachu become ghosts and enjoyed the nightlife with the Ghost Trio for a bit. He eventually does convince Haunter to join him, but it's not really an official catch. Anyways, they head back to Saffron, again, instantly, and Ash has his rematch against Sabrina, which ends with Haunter making Kadabra laugh so hard that it is unable to battle. What the hell? This makes the third badge that was essentially handed to Ash, and I have no idea how this was stretched out over 3 episodes. Like, yeah, there was a subplot regarding regarding Sabrina's family, but it was all really blah and stuff. With his 4th badge, it's off to Celadon City, where the actual 4th badge was supposed to be, and Ash hasn't gotten any new Pokemon since he was Krabby. He got a Krabby. Enter Mankey, the monkey Pokemon. Up till now, Ash has caught pretty much all his Pokemon by simply throwing Pokeballs at them, so of course he tries to skip actually finding the Mankey. Oh, and I feel obligated to mention that this is the famous jelly-filled donut episode.
These donuts are great! Nothing beats a jelly-filled donut.
It's a funny line and all, but this actually isn't the first time we've heard them refer to onigiri as jelly-filled donuts. That honor goes to the Squirtle episode.
Oh no! They're eating all the jelly donuts and eclairs!
Back to the Primeape, Ash needs to use most of his entire team to weaken this monster, and he still only just barely manages to catch it. I'm sure that Primeape, powerful as it is, will come in handy in the next episode where he faces his next gym battle. Well, I like how this episode depicts Ash as a raging racist towards perfume. Nothing sexist, just pure hatred of perfume specifically. This of course gets him kicked out of the gym, leading to his cross-dressing debut. You know, there's something humorous about a girl voicing a guy pretending to be a girl. By some miracle, Ash makes it to his gym battle, but hesitates to use Primeape due to how berserk it is. He instead opts to use Charmander, which only loses because of Gloom's smell. Kind of unfair. However, he doesn't even bother to try Pidgeotto, which should not only be able to fly over the smell, but also send it back with gust. Yet again, shenanigans ensue before he finishes the fight, and thus this batch becomes yet another gift for helping people and not for actually winning the gym battle.
Do I hear 5?
The next episode would hardly be worth mentioning if not for the fact that this is where Misty picks up Psyduck. There's this whole mystery where kids are disappearing and Pokemon are falling ill, including Misty's eventual Psyduck, supposedly. Turns out both are being caused by a Hypno and a Drowsy performing their hypnosis on people in a rooftop mansion. Pokemon lose their energy and the kids start acting like Pokemon and run off.
Why are they acting that way?
Pokemon-itis.
Brock, don't make shit up like that. He's 10. Obviously, Team Rocket wants these Pokemon for themselves, but I love how when they go to capture them, Drowsy's just sitting there vibing. Meanwhile, Hypno has this giant WTF look on its face, as if it didn't know what's up. Ash's team beat Team Rocket, everyone turns back to normal, and save the day. So, I have a lot of questions about this episode. Why do the psychic Pokemon affect people and Pokemon nowhere near them? Why was Psyduck's behavior considered abnormal? How did Northstroy specifically not know how a Psyduck works? Where did that Psyduck even come from? It had to be wild for Misty to catch it. Did it just walk in one day? Why was a kid's mom suddenly on the roof at the end of the episode as if she knew where to go? More importantly, why is there a f***ing mansion on the roof of a building? Sadly, we'll never know the answers to these questions, but whatever. Misty has a Psyduck now. Enjoy your new mascot, gang. Speaking of new Pokemon, Brock finally gets a shot. In an episode on Pokemon Beauty, we meet Susie, and I gotta say, if Brock got a chance to actually settle down with anyone, I'd reckon it probably should have been Susie, disregarding anything beyond Gen 6, which I haven't watched. Fortunately, it's far too early to drop the joke of Brock fawning over a woman, so instead, here's a Vulpix as a consolation prize. Enjoy barely using it in the series. By the way, I have mad respect for James's ability to rock any outfit or disguise he wears. As a child, I never thought twice about how this man seemed to have more skirts than pants in his arsenal. This man was normalizing cross-dressing in the 90s. Let's just put it that way. After that string of Get New Pokemon episodes, we have an exciting episode about a tournament consisting of only fighting-type Pokemon. Obviously, Ash enters Primeape because why wouldn't he? And oh good lord, what is with that baby's face? It looks like they photoshopped Pikachu's face onto the baby. Even the mom looks butt-fuddled. The woman next to her can't even bear to look at it. Sorry, I got distracted. Misty notes that Primeape wouldn't listen to Ash and would probably just go berserk, but we've been given no reason to believe that it still goes berserk after being caught, as this is literally the first episode Ash actually uses Primeape in battle. It's also the last time, as Ash hands over the Primeape to some dude who promises to train it to be a better fighter. Primeape won that tournament, by the way, never went berserk. I don't know why Ash felt the need to let someone else train it. This is a worse send-off than Butterfree. We don't even get a short reunion clip between them at the end. Absolute travesty. Moving on, we make our way over to the power plant? What the hell? How did you guys get so far off course?
Leads them to a desolate factory town known as Gringy City.
Okay, it's not the power plant, but it could have been.
Gringy? Never heard of it.
Yeah, me neither. Pretty sure they made the city up just to shove a bunch of pollution and environmental talk at us. Pikachu immediately gets ill for unknown reasons, so they head to the Pokemon Center.
Nurse!
Do you you kids have any idea just what time it is?
Do you know that you work at a hospital and that this could be a fucking emergency?
Are you by any chance the oddball in your family?
Oh no, it's all my other relatives that are odd.
This does not bode confidence. To make things worse, the power goes out, so now all the Pokemon are in danger. Whatever will they do? Obviously, they're gonna leave it to the kids between the ages of 10 and 15 to investigate.
But there's no answer at the power plant.
So they are near the power plant. Go through Rock Tunnel, you cowards. I bet you won't. Eventually, we find out that a bunch of Grimer are the cause of everything, led by a muck that Ash eventually catches, as the rest of the Grimer are chased away by Magnemite. In our next episode... Wow, what antagonizing music for a bunch of trucks that have yet to do anything wrong. We learn that Diglett are preventing workers from doing their construction because it would leave wild Pokemon homeless. Wow, 2 environmental awareness episodes back to back. Also, Team Rocket evolved their Pokemon. They eat just as much shit as they did before. Now, it's been about 5 episodes since Ash last got a badge, so let's do another gym episode. You know, looking back, I love how Pokemon was actually secretly very Japanese. And now that I've watched more anime, this scene makes so much more sense to me, culturally speaking. Anyways, Ash gets his 6th badge, and it's off to the next city. Alright, look, episodes like this remind me that they really didn't seem to care much about gym battles in Season 1. This episode actually feels like it's more about Misty's side doctor. This is where we learn it actually has, like, its headache superpowers. But for now we enter what I like to call the filler arc of the season. For reasons I'll get into soon, it took 32 episodes for Ash to get 6 badges, yet it will take about 30 more to get his next one. Meaning there is a lot of random stories in between, most of which don't really contribute anything, so I'll do my best to keep it to the highlights. First, we got the Ponyta episode, where Ash wins a horse race. Question, is it legal for Pikachu to enter the race with a Squirtle? Next is the Kangaskhan episode, where once again we have guns pointed at Ash. Of course it's Jenny holding them up. In true Jenny fashion, she immediately asks the trio to help her with the poaching issue. You're the police! Do your job! Stop getting children to help you, you incompetent fuck! Also, this kid, is he supposed to be 8? How the heck is he 8? Ash is 10 and twice his size. The next episode is where the gang actually plays in the Safari Zone. It's mostly about finding the Dratini, but it's more widely known as the banned episode related to gun use. By the way, why this episode and not the previous 2 cases of gun use? Okay, fine. Nothing we haven't seen before. Okay, but they could have cut that part and just have him reach for the safari balls. Good lord, he's gonna do this all episode, isn't he? Oh, honestly, it's a funny gag, mostly because of the music cue. Okay, he's actually firing the guns in this episode. That's probably why it got banned. Aw, man, that was really funny, and my childhood missed it because of the stupid gun. For the record, this is also the episode where we get introduced to Misty's special lure collection, as well as the episode where Ash catches 30 Tauros. I always wondered where those came from. I love how Ash wasn't even trying to catch a bunch of Tauros, they just kept getting in his way. Let's check the map for a sec. Considering we just left the Safari Zone and it's clearly cycling road, I can only imagine the gang is heading back to Celadon for some reason.
If a certain someone here hadn't totally destroyed my bike, we could be just zipping right across this bridge now, couldn't we?
No, one of you could, Misty, you guilt-tripping dick. Oh, then we have the Ditto episode. I like Duplica, she's fun. I think we get one more episode with her later, which makes me wonder why they don't bring back these otherwise one-off characters more often. Also, she dresses like Steven Universe, and I like Steven Universe. Alright, this next one's worth some pause as it's one of the most famously banned episodes that led to a lot of shit behind the scenes. Computer Warrior Porygon. Not only did this episode get banned from airing, it also led to banning the appearance of Porygon and its evolutions, despite the fact that Porygon itself had nothing to do with what happened. It involves Professor Akihabara, yes that is his name, look it up, and the Pokemon transfer system he designed, having some kind of virus. The reason the episode was banned was due to its flashy lights that reportedly caused seizures, and while I'm certainly not above trying to give my audience a seizure by showing you some examples, the worst of it is when Pikachu, not Porygon, tries to thunderbolt some antivirus rockets coming at them. Apparently, it was this shock specifically that caused the episode to get banned. Nothing substantially important happens in this episode, so it doesn't matter that it got banned. However, I feel like the blame is poorly placed on Porygon, refusing to show it ever again. Following up the episode where Pikachu's thunder shocks caused the kids to get hospitalized, they put out an episode about getting rid of Pikachu entirely. I don't know if this was some test to see how people would react to losing their mascot or what. Ash finds a group of wild Pikachu and contemplates leaving his with them. Also, Ash's Pikachu seems to be the only one on 2 legs. All the other ones are quadrupeds. Weird. Obviously, Pikachu doesn't actually get released, but they still go above and beyond to make it really sad and sappy, even playing the most overly dramatic song from this season to help sell it.
I'll always remember the time has come.
That was actually part 1 of a 2-part special for the return to Japanese television. Yes, it was on hiatus, I'll get to that in a bit. The second part is all about Eevee and its evolutions. I like the game continuity in this episode and how it's specifically about stone evolutions and the Pokemon that use them. Look, here's a good example. Okay, tell me I wasn't the only kid who saw that evolution and was just completely puzzled at why that blue tadpole turned into a slightly bigger, slightly angrier tadpole. Especially when everyone else is remarking how amazing it is.
Flareon, fire spin!
That was dumb and stupid. Idiot nearly lit the forest on fire. Still don't believe they're near Celadon City? The gang is tasked with waking up a Snorlax. And by tasked, I mean Misty volunteers them.
We'll find out what the problem is.
Why? You're a bunch of children. Why would you be any more capable than the actual townsfolk at solving their food storage problem? Of course, drawing from the games, it's some old man's Pokéflute that's needed to wake up the Snorlax, making it a race between Ash's group and Team Rocket to see who can get the old man first. Who cares which one of you gets him? Just take him there. With that problem solved, the mayor offers to celebrate with a banquet. What? No! Grow your food! Cripes, no wonder they needed kids to help them. Next stop is Dark City. A civil war is broken out between the Kaz Gym and the Yaz Gym.
Electabuzz, send them flooding with a thunder punch.
Wait, where have I heard that voice before?
Give it a thunderbolt.
Oh, that's right. It's the OG Meowth. Time for the kids to go undercover because people might recognize their names, I guess.
My name is really Tom Ado.
My name is Anchovy.
And my name is Caesar Salad.
I take it back, those nicknames are great. For some reason, the 2 mascot Pokemon act crazy when seeing red. Quality you'd expect more from a Tauros, but whatever. Naturally, they use this to break up the fight. You know, it's a shame Pikachu never says Cachoopy to really nail in the joke that this episode is about it liking ketchup. After a long run of filler episodes, we finally get to something memorable. March comes in like an executor. Okay, yeah, it's still mostly filler, but I'll always fondly remember this as the episode we got Charmeleon. That said, looking at it with fresh eyes, a lot of things sort of bugged me about this episode. First of all, I always have a different image in my head of Melvin, the guy who owns the Execute. Normally, I recall some sort of shady magician. Then I'll come back to this episode, and he's just a depressing dweeb.
I'll never make it to Las Vegas.
Dude, you are so far away from Las Vegas, and I don't even mean that figuratively. Melvin just kidnaps Ash in front of his friends. I'm serious, Ash accidentally falls under hypnosis from Melvin's Execute, and upon figuring it out, we immediately cut to the guy riding off with Ash in tow. Or I guess Ash is the one towing him. You get the idea. He makes Ash catch a lot of Executor, which, good lord, Ash is apparently a more competent trainer under hypnosis than he ever was fully awake. He seems to catch more Executor than he did Tauros. Begs another question, does Ash own those Executor? They do continue to act like wild Pokemon despite being caught in Pokeballs, so I have no idea. Of course, Team Rocket appears, shenanigans ensue, and the Executor stampede into the circus. I'm sure the local circus leader has a plan to stop the Executor, right?
I've planted a time bomb in this clearing.
What? And where did you get this time bomb exactly? Oh, and to make this whole thing more annoying, despite having just recently gone through stone evolutions, Melvin's Execute just casually evolves without one. I guess we're just breaking that rule now. It's fine though, because at the end, the day is saved thanks to Charmander, who is rewarded with its evolution into Charmeleon, and without further hesitation, immediately starts being a dick to Ash. That was the first in what I like to call the Charizard arc, since we basically have this string of 4 episodes taking Charmander to its full evolution. But first, the Paris episode. A girl wants to give her Paris enough experience to evolve into a Parasect, you know, for herbalist purposes. Ash tries having Squirtle and Pikachu hold back, but they still manage to beat Paris. You know, Ash, you should try using Pidgeotto. Paris would definitely win if you use Pidgeotto. Of course, aside from Pidgeotto, Ash really only has one other option. Bulbasaur, no, of course he uses Charmeleon. Ash is stupid. Come on, keep up. Obviously, it goes horribly wrong as Charmeleon expresses further dickitude and disobedience. Team Rocket actually does something cool for once, helping Paris actually gain fighting experience. It's sad they still get blasted away after this. The group then finds themselves in a desert? Okay, I have no idea where they are anymore. They eventually find a literal city that never sleeps, and I can't even give Jenny crap for this episode. This is a terrible place for a cop to work, and she's actually doing her job. So this is the episode where we get introduced to Jigglypuff, a long-running gang of a Pokemon whose job is to put characters to sleep by song whenever it's convenient. I actually forgot how much of a brat Jigglypuff was, even before it started drawing on people's faces. I do like the pout it makes, though. Hang on, that pout looks sort of familiar. Wait a minute, cute, pink? Puts people to sleep? Oh my god, Jigglypuff is just Nino! You know, ever since Fuchsia City, we've gone through Cycling Road, possibly Celadon, and just last episode a desert, which I can only assume is either Mount Moon or Rock Tunnel. I'm pretty sure the group managed to accidentally backtrack all the way to the top of Kanto, and I'm pretty sure it's Mount Moon because that's where Jigglypuff is. Don't believe me? Well, next we encounter fossil Pokemon. I rest my case. This is definitely one of the most memorable episodes of Kanto, as we not only get to see the amazing evolution that is Charizard, as well as its fight with Aerodactyl, cued to one of the best soundtracks, but it also introduces us to a mysterious egg that the group decides to take care of. And boy, I don't think anyone was prepared for what hatches out of that thing. You'd think having a Chansey episode next would give that egg some relevance, but nope, just a plain old hospital drama.
Well, he may have had a soft spot for Misty, but he sure seemed pretty hard on you, Ash.
He's not the only one who has a soft spot for pretty girls, is he?
Misty, don't give Brock shit. Brock goes after older women. This doctor is clearly a pedophile.
Well, how could I turn down such a pretty face?
Now that I say that out loud, this man is clearly a pedophile.
You don't think I'm doing all this shopping just for myself, do you?
Yeah. She's also shopping for James. Next episode, titled Princess vs. Princess, is about James and his fiancée Jezebel. Wait, hold up, that's not right. Alright, time to talk about this. Trying to figure out the proper watch order for Pokemon Season 1 is like trying to navigate a maze designed by the Paradox Brothers.
The test a choice that you must make. Which of these doors will you take? Ha!
Remember the Porygon episode that got banned? See, the direct consequence of the seizure hospitalizations was that Pokemon had to be put on hiatus for 4 months. When they came back, they aired the 1-hour special on Pikachu's possible departure, with the second half on the Eevee brothers. This hiatus caused Pokemon to lose its Tuesday time slot and got moved to Thursday. Why was this important? Well, Princess vs. Princess is an episode on Hina Matsuri, and it just so happens that Hina Matsuri that year would fall on March 3rd, 1998, which was a Tuesday. So the plan was to have a Hina Matsuri episode on the actual Hina Matsuri. Instead, the hiatus skipped March entirely and moved Pokemon to Thursdays. This caused the showrunners to hold on to the episode until July 9th, where it aired it as a 1-hour special alongside the episode they planned to release for Children's Day. Also a Tuesday, so it had the same issue. Pretty much every website uses the airing order, so that's how I ended up watching it. For the sake of making things easier to follow, though, I will discuss the episodes in the order they were meant to be aired in, especially since it would otherwise cause some continuity errors. For example, by the time this episode actually aired, the Pokemon egg had already hatched. Obviously, though, that Pokemon is nowhere to be seen in this Misty-focused episode. So what happens in Princess vs. Princess? Basically, the girls get to show off their skills for once in a 4v4 tournament to win some doll collection as a prize. I gotta say, that's a pretty sweet-looking doll collection. Kinda jealous. Misty borrows her friend's Pokemon for type coverage, meanwhile Jessie uses all of Team Rocket's Pokemon, including Meowth. Wait, can he do that? Unfortunately, that means Jessie doesn't have 4 Pokemon to use. Or does she? Turns out the only gun they won't ban is Chekhov's, as Jessie actually caught a Lickitung at the beginning of this episode to be used in the final battle against Misty. It almost wins her the fight, but as we've seen before, Psyduck one-shots everything. What the? Were you fighting on the roof? Why does Pokemon keep doing stuff on building tops? I need answers, people! And now for one of the greatest episodes in early Pokemon, James's backstory. God, I'd love to unpack this episode fully, but time is of the essence, so instead I'll have to give you the quick version. What? I said quick, not short. Far-fetched episode next, following a con artist who steals Misty's bag. How long this guy has been tailing Misty, I don't know, but it was long enough to get a duplicate of her bag. He gets around to stealing including Team Rocket's Pokemon, including Jesse's Lickitung, which, as I pointed out, was caught in Princess vs. Princess, which wouldn't air for another 2.5 months, so this was a continuity error.
Go capture more Pokemon and collect some new badges, too.
We're on our way right now! Who gets to keep Togepi?
Well, I hope it's Ash, otherwise Professor Oak's gonna start thinking he picked the wrong family to join. On the subject of badges...
Where to next?
We could head to Cinnabar Island and the Cinnabar Gym.
Wait, you mean you didn't know? What have you been doing all this time? Good lord, it's no wonder they've been wandering around all over the place for 20 episodes. They literally have no plan. Given this is the episode where the egg finally hatches into Togepi, it's almost like this is where the writers decided to stop fucking around and get back on track. Since Togepi isn't a Gen 1 Pokemon, the plot calls for Ash to get an upgrade to his Pokedex.
Your Pokedex will have an updated database, and even a new voice.
Somebody got fired. No, really, the voice change was English only.
Specific information about this Pokemon is still unavailable.
Oh, great update! I wonder if the royalties James got for selling his voice to make the Pokedex is how Team Rocket actually scrapes by. Oddly enough, this became the second role that the English and Japanese voice actors for Dexter shared, third if you include Charmeleon. In any event, everyone wants to keep this newly discovered Pokemon, each having their own justification for it, Meowth included. And so we get a mini-tournament. Obviously Ash wins because there was really no way for him to lose. Surprisingly though, Ash doesn't get to keep Togepi. Misty does. Why?
Togepi is imprinted with the image of the first thing it sees after it hatches.
Oh, so now you know stuff about it. Ash hasn't tried to abandon a Pokemon for a while, so we get an episode on a cult of Bulbasaur. And I do mean cult. The way they chant literally screams, "One of us, one of us." Bulbasaur, being a good Christian dinosaur vegetable, doesn't want to evolve at all, despite the glowing of its bulb signifying it's ready to, which is a unique trait of this Pokemon that we will never see again. Instead, Bulbasaur learns Solar Beam and decides to stay with Ash. In the Growlithe episode, the trio stops the thief carrying a gun. It still hits me in a weird way they were willing to zoom in on this guy's gun despite banning the Dratini episode for gun use. I guess it was fine here because the gun isn't fired, but cultural osmosis has always led me to believe that any appearance of a firearm would require censoring. I mean, they edited guns out of Yu-Gi-Oh! On the regular, and Yu-Gi-Oh! Had a higher age rating.
He's not a thief! He's a police officer training our K9 police unit.
And how are they supposed to know that? Get off their asses, Jenny. Maybe do your fucking job. Oh, and of course, Ash hears K9 police training and has to enlist Pikachu so they can get stronger, leading them into a hilarity of efforts to keep up with the military combat exercises.
Maybe Pikachu just isn't cut out for that kind of training.
Come on, Brock. The more you say that, the more he's going to want to do it. Team Rocket manages to take control of the Growlithe using an Officer Jenny voice changer. Damn, to think all they needed for that was a megaphone. I wonder what political drama will get stirred up if this episode aired today. Let's talk about Pokemon Snap. More specifically, its main character, Todd Snap. Todd was introduced to the anime in July 1998. He was then featured in 3 episodes before disappearing from the show until Pokemon Chronicles. The first episode is just his general introduction, which once again randomly features a gun. Ash responds the only correct way.
Look out, everyone!
Turns out it's just Todd with his camera. So what's Todd's deal?
I take your picture and I'm world famous.
I like this guy, he's delusional. I also appreciate the continuity nod when he shows them his picture of an Aerodactyl, and it's the same one that kidnapped Ash 7 episodes ago. After some mishaps, Todd decides to join the group for a bit. The second episode doesn't really feature Todd beyond him just being another group member, but it is the episode Ash tries a side route to the Pokemon League involving a series of tests.
Jigglypuff seen from above.
Yes! That episode. Instructor, while we have you there, could you teach us something about type advantage?
You should have known that electricity doesn't work on rock Pokemon.
You're the reason! You're the reason everyone botches this matchup! Rock-type Pokemon are not immune to electricity moves. Ground types are. You, sir, do not deserve to exist as a human being. The third episode Todd is around for features Rocket 2.0, aka Butch Cassidy, aka Cassidy and Butch. They're more like a competent Team Rocket trio if trio was synonymous with the word duo. Cassidy has the hair of a Blaziken. Think about that one for a moment. Butch!
The boss is really ticked off that he hasn't heard from you. He thinks it's insulting.
Geez, Brock, didn't that hurt your voice? Yes, I found yet another major character voiced by Eric Stewart. I think Pokemon only has like 5 voice actors in total, and Eric Stewart is the only dude. Butch Cassidy's scheme is all about storing Pokemon for daycare, pretending to fix a few problems, and then running off with the good ones. Included in the bunch is James's Weepin' Bell, now a Victory Bell. Alright, two things. First of all, that's not even that impressive. They just threw a leaf stone on it, called it a day. Second, considering James has never mentioned a Weepin' Bell, who knows how long his breeding operation has been in place. After the Pokemon trafficking has been taken care of, Todd just decides to take a different path out of the city. Yet 3 days with Ash and he could already tell he was in over his head. Again, this all aired July 1998. It wasn't until March 1999 that the spin-off game Pokemon Snap was released in Japan, featuring Todd as its main character. I haven't been able to find anything on this, but my theory is that they introduced Todd as a new party member with the idea of having a character with a different view on things via photography. People seem to like Todd, and so someone at HQ pitched the idea of making a spin-off game instead, with him as the main character. Games like this normally take about 9 months to develop, so the timeline makes sense. Regardless of how or why, it seemed like Todd was there to test the waters before moving forward with the spin-off idea. On the English side of things, it worked out even better. Todd's episodes aired in April 1999, and then Pokemon Snap came to North America in July 1999. So Todd ended up acting even more like a marketing campaign in the West. The Pokemon Company never intended to make another Pokemon Snap, but as we all know, fans managed to bitch hard enough to eventually get new Pokemon Snap, and it only took 20 years. The Perfect Hero is a Children's Day episode centered more on Team Rocket's Meowth. I mentioned this before, but this episode was originally meant to air on actual Children's Day, May 5th. Thanks to the Porygon episode, its air date got moved to July 9th, where it was bundled with the Princess episode. After almost 30 episodes, we finally reached Cinnabar Island for Ash's 7th gym battle. Let's check out the gym.
Cinnabar Island doesn't even have a Pokemon gym.
Magic Gary was right, which to be fair he normally is, but imagine he was right and we just wasted 30 episodes for the next gym battle only for there to not be a gym. In order to actually find the gym, the group needs to solve a riddle. I have to admit the riddles aren't bad. Of course, Misty's the only one smart enough to actually solve them. This is one of the more memorable gym battles in the league, a 2-part episode where Ash loses his first attempt only to come back and win on the second go-round. It shows a bit more of Charizard and its unwillingness to follow orders, contributing to the initial loss, but later coming around to be the reason he wins. I'd like to see more gym battles like this. More often than not, Ash just wins on luck or because the gym leader decides to be nice and gift him the badge. This and Lieutenant Surge are the best gym battles for Kanto in my opinion. No, Sabrina does not count. Ash didn't earn that badge. Haunter made her laugh and she gave it to him. And Haunter wasn't even Ash's Pokemon, so he didn't even have that excuse. The Volcano badge feels a lot more earned. I gotta wonder though, if Ash used a different Pokemon than Charizard and it went into the lava, would that Pokemon just die? Like, for real, it's a volcano filled with lava. It's already questionable that Charizard survives. Yes, it's a fire type, but it's not made of lava. Also, they win with Seismic Toss of all things, a move that deals damage based on its level. But Charizard basically one-shot Magmar with that. They made it look so cool too, like it's one of the strongest moves in the game. Honestly, I'm rewatching this battle again and it's just so fucking cool, I can't stand it. Charizard literally catches a fire blast and tosses it away like, bro, how do you catch fire? Now that we've shown off Charizard, time for a Blastoise episode, along with the return of the Gyarados sub, or rather the introduction to it if you didn't see Beauty and the Beach. The group encounter a bunch of sleeping squirrel family Pokemon, and eventually deduce that Jigglypuff got stuck in Blastoise cannon, so naturally decided to start singing. Really, Jigglypuff? Is this really the right time to show off your singing talent? I admit, the acoustics are great, but if that were me, I'd be panicking. It really sunk in for me here that Eric Stewart was asked to come in and record not only Brock and James, but also dozens of noises for Squirtle, Wartortle, and Blastoise, all for one episode. And yet, I hear he got paid more for a Burger King commercial.
One commercial would get me that 15 grand that would cover my health care for my family.
Next is a Misty-focused episode at the Cerulean Gym, and how the heck are we back at Cerulean? We just got done with Cinnabar! You have to pass Viridian to get... You know what? Never mind. I'm tired of trying. Misty does an underwater play and Team Rocket tries to steal Pokemon. Again, I love how James just guns for the ballerina outfit. It's so funny to me that as a child, I never questioned how often he cross-dresses. He just owns it so well. I can let go of the fact that Arbok can just breathe underwater for some reason, but how is it beating 3 water Pokemon? It's their home turf for crying out loud. Like, why is it winning? Especially when Arbok sucks in almost every other instance. Oh, but Seal? Seal solos Arbok. Misty's sisters tried to get her to leave some of her Pokemon behind for them, including Horsey and Starmie. Oh no, not Starmie. Sad, it didn't even leave on a good note, just cowering in fear of the water-breathing Arbok that they normally beat in one hit.
I can't let this one get away.
Ash's group leave their bags behind to go chase after a Clefairy, and lo and behold, they get stolen! Apparently they're not the only ones. Obviously this must be the work of aliens, says the crazy scientist. According to one guy, a spacecraft was spotted 3 nights ago.
Come to think of it, the reports of stolen objects started 3 nights ago.
Wow, everyone's just shocked to see that Jenny managed to connect the dots on something. As if on cue, 2 aliens show up in a spaceship. This is arguably Team Rocket's best disguise, despite it being a generic alien costume. I love how confidently they just walk up, take Pikachu, and leave. I shit you not, it takes like a full minute for Ash to realize what just happened. That's not even the most surprising exchange in this scene. Crazy scientist guy pulls out his wacky alien scanner and...
According to my scanner, Clefairy is an alien!
Understandable, Clefairy has been theorized to come from the moon before this point.
Amazing! This Jigglypuff is also an alien!
Or he's a nut job. That tracks.
It's indicating that you're also an alien.
Huh?
Whoa, hang on a moment. First Clefairy, then Jigglypuff, and now Misty, or rather Togepi. Guys, I don't think that's an alien scanner. I think this man just discovered the fairy type. In case it wasn't obvious by this point, the Clefairy are the ones stealing stuff for their spaceship. Having taken Jigglypuff's microphone pen thing, it obviously wants to stop them. The Clefairy nonchalantly drive their spaceship up a building, that certainly just happened, before flying off and eventually crash landing somewhere else, only to repeat the process over. Are Clefairy from space? Guess we'll need more evidence. Remember how it took 30 episodes to get from Badge 6 to Badge 7? Well, luckily it only takes 5 episodes to get to the 8th and final badge. And boy, wowie, does this one suck! You'd think the final badge would have some more grandeur to it, but no! What's worse is that we're built up that Ash might have a difficult time by having Gary go in first despite having 10 badges already. Also, those badges, reminder that Gary told Ash there was no Cinnabar gym, yet he clearly has the volcano badge here.
So that was a fucking lie.
I mean, he either lied about it or saw the volcano explode and found it by chance shortly after Ash left. I would like to believe that Gary is never wrong about things like this, so I'm just gonna say that he was trolling Ash and knew there was a gym there all along. We found out that Giovanni, Team Rocket's boss, is the gym leader. He then proceeds to use a Mewtwo to wipe the floor with Gary's team. However, Giovanni has to take care of other shit, so Jesse and James take over for Ash's match. Ash never even meets Giovanni, or Mewtwo. As a result, the final gym is kinda ruined for me. Yes, Jesse and James could have made for cool final bosses, what with giving them strong Pokemon like they did, but then they resort to cheating as soon as things get rough, which, given the way the 3-on-3 match was going, they would have won if they hadn't cheated. None of this really matters though, because Pikachu comes in at the end and one-shots every single one of their Pokemon, including Weezing and Arbok, so that's 5 Pokemon at once. This was the worst gym battle. Hell, I hesitate to even call it a gym battle. Ash is now probably the only person who has the Earth badge, and it's for unfair reasons. With his final badge, Ash finally heads back home to prepare for the upcoming Pokemon League, while also visiting his mom. However, a wild Mr. Mime ends up living in his house. Not to be confused with the Mr. Mime that was the actual focal point of this episode, this is a different Mr. Mime. To help distinguish them, we're going to call this one Uncle Mime and the other one Garbage, because we're going to throw away its circus plotline and cast of characters and never see them again.
I think I might have a girlfriend.
Brock, no! Ash then meets up with Professor Oak, who has mentioned that Ash has seen over 100 Pokemon. I happen to keep track of every time Ash uses his Pokedex, and my total comes to 95 Pokemon. None of which are Team Rocket's Pokemon, since he never scans them, but I guess they got counted anyway at some point. That said, though Ash has seen more than Gary has caught over 200 Pokemon, beating Ash out in quantity. That kind of suggests that Gary just has like way too many duplicates. Oak also informs them that the 2 trainers besides Gary who also got their starters from the first episode have dropped out, effectively making Ash and Gary the only 2 trainers in Pallet Town entering the Pokemon League. Meanwhile, Team Rocket are in the dumps over their constant failures as they head back to HQ in fear of reprimanding. But then something interesting suddenly happens.
Let's go!
The Mewtwo that Giovanni was keeping has escaped, kicking off the plot of the first movie, Mewtwo Strikes Back. Yes, I'm covering those 2, buckle the f*** up. Originally, the scene was supposed to be shown before the movie came out to act as a teaser. However, with all the shuffling of air dates that happened, the movie actually aired about 3 months after this episode in Japan. In the West, however, we got them in the intended order, with this episode airing first, followed by the movie a month later. Unlike most anime movies, such as the ones for Digimon, Dragon Ball Z, these movies for Pokemon are canon to the show, so obviously we gotta talk about them. Of course, where there's a Pokemon movie, there is first a Pikachu episode, or at least there was back in my day. I don't know what the recent movies have been doing. As a kid, I remember loving the Pikachu's Vacation episode that played before the first movie. I think it was because it was the first time we were seeing Pokemon like Snubbull and Marill. Like, new Pokemon were a really big deal for us at the time. We didn't think there was anything beyond the initial 151, which is also what made Togepi intriguing. Since Togepi was still partially an egg, many of us figured that it must be like a stage that evolved into an actual Pokemon, but Snubbull and Marill were totally different, and it only fueled the rumors about Pika-Blue being a thing, since Marill was, for all intents and purposes, a blue, rounder Pikachu. As an adult watching this episode, I actually found this special kind of annoying. They throw up a transition every minute or so to the point where you could make it 25% shorter just by excluding them. What's worse is how unnecessary it is. Like, they're usually used to separate changes in location, which is better done by a simple jump cut. I know it sounds like I'm nitpicking on a minor thing, but these transitions can be longer than 10 seconds each. I can't even show you a complete one without the copyright bots taking the video. Meanwhile, sometimes the parts between transitions are only 20 seconds long. I'm not saying it's a bad special, it's just the constant pausing in the story was really annoying, and I have no idea how I managed to deal with that as a child. I will mention one cool thing about this special, and that is how many different Pokemon they shoved into the screen time. Got very close to 100, even debuting 3 Pokemon that, coincidentally, all end up gaining the Fairy type by Gen 6. But enough about the pre-show, let's talk about the movie proper. So what happens in the first theatrical film? Well, more than I knew, but also somehow less than I thought, if you can believe it. See, I never actually saw the first 10 minutes of the movie until making this video. Reason for this is that the first 10 minutes were actually cut from the movie's Western release, and it's entirely about Mewtwo's past. It covers this girl Ember, the clones of the 3 starter Pokemon, and other scenes that basically form the building blocks for why Mewtwo has this obsession with clones ruling over the originals.
Let's run another scan. Its mind is racing.
I want to just hear a lady yell, "Its mind is racist"?
Its mind is racing.
No? Just me? Alright then. As for the part I've actually seen, I found myself struggling to remember how we actually end up in this situation that we end up in. Let me summarize. We start with Ash's group doing their normal travel thing, even Ash having a battle with a random trainer, something that rarely happens in the series, despite what the games would have you believe. Even introducing another new Pokemon, Donphan. Not that any of us knew what it was called, nor would we for a while since this part didn't have dialogue, but man did it look cool. Mewtwo invites several trainers to fight a powerful Pokemon master. A typhoon prevents people from taking ships to the island, so only the toughest trainers manage to get there. Somehow Ash and his friends managed to make it, though not without nearly dying in the waves on the way. I hate to think about what poor Togepi was going through during all that. The trainers are served a big dinner, and then Mewtwo proceeds to shit on them and humanity, calling trainers weak and cruel and how Pokemon shouldn't be slaves. You can really tell that Takeshi Shudo wrote this movie from that line alone. Of course, Mewtwo also sees that the Pokemon that follow humans are no better, so clearly clones are the way to go.
What?
Mewtwo, my boy, my buddy, my test tube abomination, what is your plan? Why did you bring them here? Mewtwo clearly wants to overthrow humanity with an army of clones. That much is made perfectly clear, but in that case, why did he spend so much time not only luring strong trainers to his vicinity, but also serve them up a meal? Like, do you hate humans or don't you? Why the hospitality? Why give a f***? Why give them a chance to stop you from enacting your plan? Mewtwo then proceeds to beat the crap out of the trainer's Pokemon using clone versions of them. Not clone versions of their Pokemon, clones of that particular species, which at that point, who cares? It's just another Pokemon. There's no proof that it being a clone is what made it better. Yet for his victory, Mewtwo decides to take everyone's Pokemon. I've never understood villains who take the losing party as their prize. They lost. Why would you want them? You just talk shit about their inferiority. Oh, but he doesn't just use any Pokeballs. He used specially made Pokeballs that can catch other Pokeballs. Let me tell you something. As a kid, that f***ed me up. That is the most terrifying piece of Pokemon media I have seen or will ever see. I can't wait to be proven wrong on that. Can someone please go hide Togepi until this is all over?
There goes Alakazam.
That's a Scyther. Ash helps free the Pokemon, and soon enough we have an all-out war between originals and clones. Even the original Mew drops by. Despite being the one who friggin' brought the originals up to the clones, Ash tries to stop them all from fighting by intercepting Mew and Mewtwo's attacks. And this makes the second time Ash has died in the series. No, it will not be the last. It is, however, for one reason or another, more permanent, as Ash doesn't simply become a ghost that can re-enter his body. God, can you imagine if he did though and they just didn't show because it would ruin the mood? Imagine Misty's just bawling her eyes out over Ash's death and suddenly gets lifted and yeeted in the air. Who knows, maybe Ash did ghost it and just couldn't re-enter his body because it was covered in stone. And obviously we can't have his spirit inhabit a rock. That'd make him a rock ghost type, and we all know those don't exist. Instead, it takes the power of everyone's tears to revive Ash, which is ultimately what leads Mewtwo's forces to come to terms with the rest of the Pokemon and their trainers. Mewtwo decides to take his army of clones and find a peaceful place that they can live in, and I'm sure we'll never hear from them again. Also, memory wipe, because we're not allowed to remember our life lessons, I guess. So yeah, all in all, I don't really understand why Mewtwo set up this whole event. You could argue that he wanted to take the strongest trainers Pokemon and make clones of them, but then he was able to beat them using clones of Pokemon that were completely unrelated, so clearly the clones are stronger by default, right? He could have just used any clones. Before we get back to the anime proper, a pair of Christmas episodes aired around this time on TV. In October. That's the perfect time for Christmas specials. One is about Jinx being Santa's stand-in, and the other is about Ash getting snowed in with his Pokemon. Of course, the best Pokemon to use for any ice-flavored situation is Fire. Fortunately, Charizard still doesn't listen to Ash, so... Okay, yeah, once again, the episode structure for the Kanto League is a true nightmare to deal with. Originally, these episodes were supposed to air directly after the Porygon episode. Obviously, Charmander hadn't evolved at the time, hence the discrepancy. Since these were clearly Christmas-themed episodes, they decided to hold on to them until December instead of when the hiatus ended. However, by October, it was clear that the show was going to be well into the long-awaited Pokemon League arc, and they didn't want to interrupt that, so they were aired as specials in October instead. The English dub elected not to shove them in wherever and waited until the Pokemon League ended before airing these episodes, and to make it better, it was December when these aired. And so they served as the perfect divider between the Kanto League and the Orange Islands. Confused the crap out of child me that Ash had a Charmander again, but it was a fairly memorable and sweet episode about Ash making it through a snowstorm with his Pokemon by his side to help keep him warm even though they could just stay in Pokeballs. Then you have the Jinx episode, where the gang used their water Pokemon to, I shit you not, swim to the North friggin' Pole! Since Kanto is supposed to be based in Japan, you might say that the North Pole is really fucking far. Actually, I did the math once, and given how long it takes for them to travel across Cycling Road, if we go by this map of Kanto, then theoretically it only takes a few hours for them to walk from one corner to the other, meaning that the North Pole is probably just a few days away. Yeah, that's still too far. Real quick, why does Lapras have telepathic powers? Jinx is a psychic type. It's not talking to anyone. And I suppose I can't really cover this episode without talking about Jinx and blackface and all that jazz. Alright, a cultural critic named Carol Boston Weatherford pointed out how the Jinx from this specific episode was politically incorrect, comparing it to other racist characters, which included Popo, even though he wouldn't get recolored blue until they made Kai in 2009, 10 years later. This complaint was included in an article featured in a magazine called Black World Today, and so repercussions ensued. Jinx's sprites were recolored purple for Pokemon Gold and Silver, first in the West and then eventually for everyone. Episode 250 would be cut from international releases, a scene from 287 was cut, 389 debuted the purple version of Jinx in the anime, and eventually Jinx was just retroactively recolored in all previous appearances. Although encountering these recolored versions in the West is somewhat difficult. In all earnestness, Jinx was supposed to be based on a type of style in Japan called Ganguro, a somewhat more extreme predecessor to Gyalu, featuring the long blonde hair, dark skin, etc. In no way was Jinx actually meant to be some sort of racist character or a reference to blackface. I don't even think Japan knows what a black person looks like, if I'm being honest. Regardless, the change was for the best in my opinion. Purple Jinx just looks better. To prepare for the Pokemon League, the next several episodes are about Ash training, or at least that's what he says he does. Supposedly, he spends 2 months during this time, but from what I saw, he basically farts around and does a whole lot of nothing. Most of the time when he does appear to be training, he's the one running around and working out. Like, how does that help him in the Pokemon League, really? This truly is the most boring part of the series, so here's some cliff notes. The gang learns about how Slowpoke used Shelter to evolve, which makes me wonder what happens if the Shelter and the Slowpoke have different trainers owning them. Jessie ends up losing her Shelter from the evolution here, but the Slowpoke didn't belong to anyone. She should get to keep the damn Slowbro. They encounter Surfing Pikachu, notably with blue eyes, otherwise known as one of the many candidates for the rumored Pika-Blue. Really though, it's a giant reference to the surfing minigame from Pokemon Yellow. If you don't know what I'm talking about, I don't blame you. You could only play this minigame with an event-exclusive Surfing Pikachu. The fact we have actual kahunas from Alola down the road makes calling this guy the Pikahuna sound gross. What's worse is he named his Pikachu Puka. You serious, dude? Oh my god. And the huge wave thing is called Humunga Dunga. Y'all are fucking with me with that one, right? I feel like I just watched Korone play Banjo-Kazooie. Despite constantly talking about how people want to ride this damn wave, when it finally comes, this guy is the only one riding it. Everyone else bitches out and evacuates the beach. Brock fails yet another romance by getting cucked for the Gloom Trainer, and Ash delivers one of his sickest burns in the entire series.
I don't see any beautiful girl.
Just turn around.
Misty, please, only one of us can hallucinate at a time.
The gang stumbles upon a movie being filmed by none other than...
Cleavon Spielbank, winner of the Golden Growlithe for Best Director.
Hold on, just gonna stop you right there. That's an Arcanine, not a Growlithe. No, but apparently this guy is a big deal, which is why he'll never be mentioned again after this episode.
You directed my absolute most favorite movie of all time. I Saw What You Ate last Tuesday.
You made that? Wow, I almost saw that one.
I like this girl. She talks shit without even trying. You see Misty pull Brock away from a girl by the ear for the first time, which I think is bullshit. I think Brock is completely harmless when it comes to courting women. He's just not very successful at it, and we don't need Misty making things harder for him.
Come back! We're your biggest fans!
We're your only fans!
James, shut up. That means something different now. We learned about Meowth's backstory while Ash's group watched the movie they filmed. Wow, rare actual physical violence against the female of the group. Usually be Ash or Brock taking the hit. Speaking of Ash and Brock, they attempt to train under Bruno, one of the Elite Four, though that turns out to be mostly fake advice gags. Actual fake advice, not like the ones in Karate Kid that actually lead to something, like actual fake advice.
And now all we've got to do is wait for that rocky reptile to show its petrified puss.
Is that allowed? Can she say that? Giant Ancient Alakazam versus Giant Ancient Gengar, all settled by Giant Ancient Jigglypuff. If you're like me, you completely forgot Jigglypuff existed. Of course, before it leaves, it has to paint all over everyone's faces. Are all Jigglypuff like this? Do none of them understand how Sing works? Another Pikachu special, Winter Vacation, airs around here, but it's far less interesting, and was rolled into the Pokemon Chronicles show for Western release. Speaking of, you might be surprised to learn that Pokemon Chronicles, not a thing in Japanese media. It's a collection of specials and shorts put together for the English audience to watch as its own show, which is why it bounces around a lot in terms of character perspective. So the Winter Vacation is the 22nd episode of Chronicles, but is otherwise two separate shorts. In the first part, the gang's Pokemon are just sitting around getting ready for Christmas. You know, I wonder if Pokemon have religious preferences. For all we know, Bulbasaur could be Jewish and celebrate Hanukkah. I don't have anything to support that, but you know what? Neither do you. Second part is them playing games in the snow, and this is probably the only time we'll get to see a baby Kangaskhan being a baby Kangaskhan. I did have to laugh, though, at Squirtle's face upon it being used as a sled. Enough about that, the Pokemon League tournament is finally coming up. How's that been going, Ash?
We planned on training a whole lot, but we seem to get sidetracked a whole lot more.
Damn, that really summarizes the last 10 episodes, don't it? As it turns out, it's already time for them to leave. Off to Victory Road, where Ash must battle powerful trainers such as Hitoshi the Samurai. And of course, being a samurai, there was no need to change the Japanese name. I'm just kidding. His real name was Saizo. This match is for all the marbles, though, as whoever loses has to give up their badges. Man, first episode out of Phillip Forest, and already the stakes are high.
Don't worry, I'm gonna win,
said Ash before every time he lost. To his credit, he sends Bulbasaur out against Marowak, proving he has at least learned basic type matchups.
Better watch out, Ash! Marowak is bad to the bone!
Brock, come on. We expect more from you. Find out that Team Rocket has been stealing badges, including Hitoshi's. Man, there's so much to unpack here looking at James's belongings. The froze, the makeup, the bottle caps that don't even get a real explanation till later. That picture of himself is actually an edit. Originally he had Pokemon trading cards, including one from Primeape.
Did someone say Primeape?
Nope, not yet. We're almost there, I promise. Anyways, Jesse is off to scam more badges.
I battled hard to win as many as I could.
Dude, where the hell are you from to have badges that look like that?
I worked hard to earn my badges, too.
As far as I'm concerned, you earned 3 of those badges. I'm not letting that go. Oh, he can take the badges. It's fine if the gym leaders want to give handouts, but don't say he earned them. Hitoshi gets his badges back, none of which were the volcano badge, by the way, which he mentioned winning earlier. Maybe Cinnabar Gym is just like Schrodinger's box. You won't know for sure whether someone earned a badge from the gym until you open their case. To hype up the Pokemon League, you get a Torch Runner episode, and it turns out the fire used to ignite the stadium's flame is actually from a Moltres, and oh god, Ash wants to be the Torch Runner. Oh my god, no. Ash, stop. No, don't embarrass yourself. Great, Jenny is here to set things straight.
Officer Jenny, don't you know me?
Ash! You've done this before! Somehow, Ash gets permission to be a Torch Runner by the committee president. Team Rocket also wants the flame. I don't know what they're gonna do with the flame, but it's cool to have a Moltres fire, I guess. James remembered he has a victory bell. James forgot it was weak to fire. Surprisingly, Team Rocket actually does make off with the flame, though they immediately let it die out. Luckily, the president has a backup, and of course he gives it to Ash. Why wouldn't he? It may have taken 76 episodes in a movie, but we're finally here. The Indigo Plateau, aka Kanto's Pokemon League. I was not prepared for how much more fun this part of the anime is compared to almost the entire rest of the season. The concept of having special pre-round areas like the Water Ice Mountain grass fields is a really cool idea that I feel like future leagues didn't do. Currently only seen up to mid-Kalos properly, so I could be wrong. It feels like this arc was given the grandeur it deserved too. Like, this was a big deal, and it ought to be because this is the freaking Pokemon League. There's even strategy talk, and I love strategy talk. We of course kick off the final arc with Ash's first round. Let's take a look at his opponent, the astounding Mandy. Oh my god, he just killed his Pokemon. Yeah, this guy's an immediate dick to everyone, including Team Rocket, who decided to start openly cheering for Ash during his match just because they hate Mandy so much. Round 1 begins, and Ash sends out Krabby, a Pokemon Ash hasn't seen or used since he first caught it 64 episodes ago. I think we all know how this will turn out. No, we don't. Spoiler alert, Ash sweeps his entire first match with this thing. It's insane. For all intents and purposes, this shouldn't have worked. Ash should not have won this match. Instead, he literally soloed his first opponent with an untrained, nearly forgotten Pokemon. And I would be mad about this, but there's something even more upsetting to me as a Pokemon fan. Krabby uses a total of 8 different moves in this battle. I know this is the anime and not the game, but the anime is pretty consistent about Pokemon only ever knowing 4 moves at a time, which is why whenever Pikachu ends up learning a new move, like Electro Ball and Volt Tackle, it stops using one of its previous moves. Krabby uses Harden, Vice Grip, Leer, and Stomp against Mandy's first Pokemon. Evolves into Kingler, then uses Water Gun, Bubble, and Crabhammer against his second Pokemon. Finally, it uses Vice Grip against Mandy's third Pokemon. That's actually the second time it used Vice Grip. Its actual last move is frickin' Hyper Beam! They basically pulled out every single move Kingler could learn naturally in one battle. The fact that it used Vice Grip twice, and it's listed here twice, makes it even funnier. The only move he didn't use was Guillotine, which he may as well have. You're already making Kingler look OP as fuck. May as well go all the way with it. Ash, this is so... I don't want to say undeserving, but you pulled off a lot of luck to get this win. And that was just round 1! Unfortunately, round 2 and 3 aren't that great. We only see the end of round 2 and skip the first third of round 3. Before going to the third match with the terrain being ice, Ash makes a point of mentioning that his opponent might use ice Pokemon, so he should use Squirtle and Kingler, which is good. I'm glad Ash didn't consider using Charizard. Fun fact, in Gen 1, fire did not resist ice, so Charizard would actually be weak to ice moves. We start the match off with Kingler beating up Cloyster, kind of brutally in fact, only for it to lose to Arcanine? What happened to all that OP guts power from last episode? In any event, Ash opts to use Pikachu, meaning he probably already used Squirtle at the beginning. His opponent's strategy is then to melt the ice field, turning it into a pool, which on the one hand is a great strategy for dealing with Pikachu's speed by forcing it into one place. On the other hand, it's actually a really stupid idea, since it also means Arcanine would lose the minute it dodges an attack by jumping into the water. The fact that Ash almost loses this match because he momentarily forgot water conducts electricity. Round 4. Gary unceremoniously loses his match. No build-up. He just loses and leaves. Guess we're not gonna get that big Ash versus his rival match, huh? Anyways, round 4 is the grass terrain, which is the best terrain because I said so, and Ash opts to use Bulbasaur first, which actually manages to almost sweep his opponent. Good going, Bulbasaur. Those were tough matchups. Jeanette's Bellsprout, however, wiggle-woggles its way over both Bulbasaur and Pikachu, so the match is tied up. In a stroke of rare actual strategic planning, Ash sends out a Pokemon he specifically asked to swap in a day earlier earlier. He sends out his Muck, something that has advantage over grass Pokemon.
Yes, I underestimated him myself.
Ugh, I never realized Oak's eyebrows were supposed to be colored in black, but now that I see otherwise, put it away, please.
Let's face it, we're much more successful at selling stuff than we are at stealing stuff.
I agree. I'm glad they finally figured that out. Yet another thing I believe becomes a common trend in the future, them turning into salesmen during the league matchups. Also, their fast food motto is just great, I love it.
Want a burger and fries without trouble?
If you're really hungry, make it double.
To protect the world from hunger and thirst.
Our food isn't bad, at least not the worst.
With that, Ash has officially won 4 rounds and made it to the 5th round, which is basically an elimination round since it's still a 3 versus 3 match taking place before the final 8. As they wait to find out the matchups, our group meets a new trainer named Richie, who feels a lot like a beta Ash given his design and partner Pikachu named Sparky. The likeness is further commented on by the cast when we find out that Richie has a Charmander and a Butterfree. Main difference though is that he actually nicknames all his Pokemon. This episode is mostly about Ash and Richie bonding over their shared love of Pokemon, so it comes as no surprise when they find out that they have been paired up for the next match. This shakes them up a bit, but they promise to make their battle a good one before splitting off. Before the match starts, however, Ash ends up in another encounter with Team Rocket, one where they relentlessly chase him down as he tries to make it back to the league. He almost doesn't make it in time, but Richie manages to convince the referee to grant an extension. With just enough time, Ash descends to the stadium in Team Rocket's balloon, and with that, the 5th round of our Pokemon League is underway. Now, most of us probably know this already, and if you don't, then spoiler alert regarding this match's outcome, but Ash ends up losing to Richie here. However, could he have won this match under different circumstances? Let's talk about that. Richie's the first one to send out a Pokemon, and it's his Butterfree, Happy. Ash sends out Squirtle. Could Ash have sent out a better Pokemon? Well, let's think about what he has. There's Bulbasaur, Pikachu, Charizard, and Pidgeotto. We don't know his 6th Pokemon, but it could be Kingler, Tauros, or Muck. What this mystery 6th Pokemon is, we'll never know as it's never revealed, but for the sake of giving him his best shot, let's say it was Kingler, as he knows Richie has a Charmander, and Kingler provides an additional way to get past that. Kingler would be weak to Sparky's electric attacks, but at best Sparky won't resist Kingler's attacks. So in the end, it's marginally better than Tauros or Muck, who are neutral in both cases. With that being said, could Ash have picked a better Pokemon against Happy? Pidgeotto was exhausted from bringing Ash to the league. Bulbasaur is a bad type matchup. Kingler would have been as good as Squirtle, which leaves Charizard and Pikachu. Charizard would have been great, but it doesn't listen to Ash, and we know this, so using Charizard here would have been a risky play, especially for the beginning of the round. I think it's fine that he didn't choose Charizard here despite what happens later. Pikachu is similarly exhausted from the Team Rocket shenanigans, but given what happens in a bit, I would say that it would have been better to send Pikachu. Save Squirtle for later. More than anything, Pikachu should be able to make it an easy win with its type advantage. As a matter of fact, that's exactly what happens, as Squirtle goes down to Butterfree and Ash ends up sending Pikachu out anyway. The worst part is Ash didn't even say anything. Pikachu just darts in on its own, tackles Happy, and shocks it till it knocks it out, all without Ash uttering a single word. So yeah, should have kept Squirtle in reserve. That's a misplay for Ash. How Squirtle goes down, though, is bullshit, as the referee calls it defeat as a result of Sleep Powder, which is a status move, and I know full well there's a match in the Yellow League where the exact opposite happens, so misplay to the referee. Bad call. Richie sends out his Charmander Zippo, which is actually a really good move since Ash would likely have to counter with another water Pokemon, at which point Richie could just wrap it up with Sparky. In case you're thinking, well, Charmander is also weak to rock and ground, how could Richie know Ash wouldn't use one of those? Ah, well, we find out earlier in the episode, trainers can look up their opponent's previous matchups to see what Pokemon they used. They actually specifically used this on Richie to find out that Richie has stuck to the same 3 Pokemon in all his matchups. So although it's possible Ash could pull out a Pokemon he hadn't used yet, it's strategically smart of Richie to have planned around the likelihood that Ash had no counters to Zippo beyond Squirtle and Kingler. Zippo eventually beats Ash's Pikachu, which is expected, it's already exhausted. With 1 Pokemon left, Ash opts to use Charizard. This is a risky move to make, but as mentioned before, if Ash tries to beat Zippo with Kingler, then he'll end up in a tough spot facing Sparky. Again, Bulbasaur and Pidgeotto are out. The fact he doesn't throw out Tauros or Muck here adds to the credit that he probably brought Kingler. Charizard is his strongest Pokemon, and in this case, it's his best chance at beating both Zippo and Sparky, so I can't really call this one a misplay.
No, wrong. You can absolutely call that a misplay.
Truth, what are you doing? This is my analysis video.
And you're doing a terrible job because you made an egregious, erroneous mistake.
Okay, and that is?
That Ash's 6th Pokemon should have been Kingler.
Alright, Smarty Pants, what should he have brought then?
I'm glad you asked, because there is one Pokemon that Ash has caught that stands above all his other Pokemon. Yes, including Charizard, because not only does Charizard not listen to Ash, it only has a win ratio of about 60% by the time of the Pokémon League. This Pokemon, however, has a 100% win ratio, and no-diffed pretty much all of Ash's Pokemon before he finally wore it down for capture. Yes, that's right! The biggest misplay Ash has ever made is giving away his Primeape. Primeape would have easily beat both of Richie's remaining Pokemon, and probably his Butterfree too, because that's how much stronger Primeape is. For crying out loud, it won the fighting tournament! It already has like a dozen wins under its belt and 0 losses. Why on earth would you give it away? And even if it is a good idea to let someone else train it for a bit, why didn't you go pick it up in preparation for the league that you had 3 months to prepare for? You fucking idiot child.
Okay, I think that's enough about Primeape.
I swear we'll never let this go. Mark my fucking words, Hideki Sonoda.
Hideki who?
The writer for several episodes of the anime, including the one where Primeape is given away. And the matchup against Richie. So clearly someone has something against Primeape.
Okay, well regardless, Ash didn't have Primeape at the time, so the match continues with Charizard versus Zippo. To much surprise, Charizard actually bothers to, I'm gonna use the term pick on, because that's what it was, Zippo until Richie returns it. We then have Richie sending out Sparky, and Charizard stops listening to Ash again, flying off to lie down. This refusal to battle causes Ash an automatic loss, and Richie unceremoniously wins the match. This is rough for Ash, since he not only lost his match, but also lost in such an embarrassing way. It takes Ash some time to get over this loss, but eventually he manages to pull himself together to go watch Richie's next match, even giving him some words of encouragement. We don't see much of the battle at all, but based on the transitions, it looks like Richie might either have a Spearow or a Tentacool. I'm gonna guess it's the Spearow, since that would be closer to Ash's Pidgeotto, and Richie is supposed to have similar Pokemon. In the end though, Richie loses his match and thus is also removed from the tournament.
Ash would have won that match if he had brought Primeape.
You don't know that! Ash and Richie have another heart-to-heart and both declare that they will be Pokemon Masters. Pause. Maybe this is a weird question to ask this far into the series, but what exactly is a Pokemon Master? Can they both be one? Actually, is anyone in universe a Pokemon Master? I imagined it was someone who caught every Pokemon, but there's no way to know if anyone ever managed to do that. We see shadows of the top 3 trainers in the Pokemon League. Ah, look, it's AJ! Maybe. Can't prove it's not. Also, how do you have a top 3 in a bracket tournament? How do you decide 3rd place? We close on a montage showing each of Ash's Pokemon and their contributions to the league. Pidgeotto isn't part of it, but that's besides the point. With that, the first leg of Ash's long journey to become a Pokemon Master comes to a close. The first season of Pokemon will be very memorable and iconic for many people of my generation. There weren't a ton of animated kid shows with developing plotlines, and honestly there weren't a ton of anime in general. We basically had Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, and Pokemon. Again, in the West, episodes aired daily, so its popularity explosively caught up with its popularity in Japan.
Pokemon is big.
And who knows how far this is gonna go.
But 1 in every 5 kids ages 11 and under were watching this show.
So tell me, why do you like Pokemon?
I don't know.
This daily release continued for about 40 episodes before reruns started. Then Western audiences got a single new episode on November 20th, Pikachu's Goodbye. We would not see a new episode for 3 months, and the bastards left us with Pikachu's Goodbye. 3 months to a child feels like a year. We thought Pokemon had ended. They didn't have to do that either. It's not like it happened to be the next episode. They skipped that episode and aired it later in the schedule. When it returned, we only saw 1 new episode per week. There were additional periods of reruns and the occasional shuffling of episode order. By the end of the day, we were on the edges of our seats whenever we found out that a new episode was coming. From a production standpoint, Pokemon's first season is a very mixed bag. Early episodes displayed the team's interest in building the world of Pokemon and demonstrating its basic rules. In the first 5 episodes, we learn everything we need to know about what Pokemon are, how Pokemon training works, and what the goal of our protagonist is for the season. By episode 32, Ash builds a full team and gets to 6 badges. It then takes 27 episodes for him to get his 7th badge, and then 5 more to get his 8th. Suffice to say, the pacing is very jarring. However, there are several reasons for this. The staff knew a 2nd generation was in the mix, and the plan was to have the anime lead into that new region. However, Gold and Silver got pushed back. I imagine the original plan was to get the show wrapped up in a normal 50 episodes, but around the time of the Porygon hiatus, staff had time to reevaluate their plans, realized they were moving too fast, so they pushed out a bunch of filler. They probably would have pushed out more filler, except the movie was also coming up, and the tie-in they had planned occurs with the 8th gym. So so they had to quickly push out the next 2 batches. We then have to wait 10 episodes for Ash to not train for the Pokemon League, and at the end of all that, they still needed to fill up another 36 weeks with the Orange Islands to match up with the release of Gold and Silver. So yeah, Kanto had some terrible pacing. It's understandable, but a flaw nonetheless. I'm aware that future seasons aren't exactly much better, so I won't fault them too much for mistakes made so early in the series. Instead, I'll fault them for not learning from said mistakes. Animation-wise, Pokemon has always had a style of character design specific to it, which works in its favor. The copious amounts of action also calls for a level of detail that's worth mentioning. That said, there have been 1 or 2 times I've seen something like a still frame to represent action. In any event, I know from what I've watched that the animation in Pokemon is an ever-evolving thing, something they'll get better at as the series unfolds, even if the early days are a bit stiff in some places. One thing of note is that after the Porygon incident, any flashes or hypnotic special effects eventually had their frame rate altered or the lighting dimmed in order to combat the concerns of causing seizures. Something even more recognizable than Pokemon's visuals are its music. I would not be surprised if most people could go through a playlist of Pokemon soundtracks and claim to recognize every single one. They're that iconic. Granted, this could be a byproduct of Pokemon also being a video game, but still, I can probably use one hand to count the number of shows that I know more than half the music for. Don't believe me? I've been using said music throughout this entire video. Was there ever a point where you felt like you didn't know what the music was? Furthermore, although most of the music is taken from the games, they're not necessarily used for the same context. In the game, there's a specific track that plays inside of a gym, but the anime uses a variation of this track as hype music, most of the time outside of gyms. That one's easy. Here's the anime soundtrack Silly Psyduck. Can you recall what the game used this for? Took me a while, but the track is called Come Along. Yes, the song that plays whenever you follow an NPC is repurposed by the anime for scenes of comedic chaos and ensuing hijinks. When it came to dubbing Pokemon for Western audiences, we're talking about 4Kids. Obviously, there was context that was cut from the show because it was either too violent, too sexual, or too Japanese for Western kids, such as Misty slapping Ash, or James's giant boobs, or the Japanese letters behind Caterpie shortly before Misty slapping Ash. Of course, some changes stick out more than others. The rice ball being called a jelly donut is something that to this day still affects my perception on what a rice ball might taste like if I ever had one. Child Quiz was very impressionable, and I was very heartbroken when I realized those triangular white treats were not in fact a form of pastry. Due to the alterations they made, there were times where the soundtrack used was untouched as per the Japanese version, and then there were times where they replaced the music. Sometimes the music was replaced with 4Kids originals. Sometimes they were replaced with just other Pokemon music. Sometimes music would get replaced even if there was no visual alterations. Usually this was if they just didn't like the vibe that was being set. Like silence. Man, do we Westerners hate scenes without any sound. A scene where everyone is quiet and focused is too tense for us to enjoy. Great example of this would be the climax of the movie. The music here is truly exquisite, very orchestral. This scene is out to make you feel things, or at least that's what I've been told about the original Japanese version of this scene. The English version decided to go for something more uplifting. Okay, look, it's a good song. Reminds me of Yu-Gi-Oh's No Matter What. Admittedly, I fancy a song that's more driving as opposed to something quiet or angelic. Which is why I will always hold that the English version of Omnimon's appearing in Digimon's first movie is better than the original Omegamon's appearance. As opposed to... Like, I'm sorry, am I watching Digimon or am I watching Evangelion? Pokemon! I'm watching Pokemon! Apologies for the tangent. Now, the overall structure of the series is rather simplistic and predictable. Every episode is dedicated to either one of the 150 Pokemon or pushing forward the plotline by adding a new party member. That paired with Team Rocket butting in with some shenanigans that ends with them blasting off and we have ourselves an episode of Pokemon. It's not necessarily a bad thing that episodes are so straightforward. It's kind of neat to be able to go, that's the Diglett episode. That's the Fossil episode. However, some episodes were just better than others. The episodes dedicated to the fossil Pokemon or Eevee and its evolutions were cool because we learned about those groups of Pokemon, their lore, and what made them special. In the episode dedicated to Chansey really doesn't do anything. The Doctor is more intriguing of a character than Chansey is. This would have been a good opportunity to explore Pokemon we've seen many times before, but all we really learned is that other Pokemon feel too guilty to attack it. Also, what the hell is a Chansey? Seriously, take away the nurse hat and it doesn't look like anything I've ever seen before. It's got a pouch with an egg in it. Does that make it a kangaroo? Nope, that's a Kangaskhan. Also, Kangaskhan, shit kangaroo Pokemon. It doesn't even jump, looks like a dinosaur. The actual plotline of collecting 8 gym badges and entering the Pokemon League, however, is great and is usually the parts of the series we look forward to watching. It's not utilized particularly well though, because 5 of Ash's 8 gym badges are handouts. Rocket and Misty's badges were gifted to him. Ash didn't own Haunter when he faced Sabrina, and even then he didn't win through battle, he just made her laugh. For Erica, he could have earned it properly, but instead he gets it because he helped put out a fire. And Giovanni's badge is the worst of all. Ash doesn't even fight Giovanni, he fights Team Rocket, and they suck. We know they suck. If Ash faced Giovanni properly, and I mean without Mewtwo, I fully believe Giovanni would have destroyed Ash. And at the end of it all, even if you want to say he could have beaten Giovanni, even if you claim that Team Rocket subbing in is fair game, the number one reason Ash didn't earn the Earth Badge is that nobody gave Ash the Earth Badge. It fell from the sky after Team Rocket's explosion, and he decided to keep it. He basically stole that badge. So anyways, the gym plotline is neat. I liked it. I especially like the fact that the qualifying rounds of the Pokemon League has special terrain. Would have liked to see it in later tournaments. It's a shame. It's such a good idea. So much so that the Pokemon Stadium map in Smash actually has the ability to change terrains. The big drawback about the League plotline, though, is that it is the only plotline. It won't be until Hoenn that we start to get plotlines revolving around the regional villains and the female companion. To think that the League plotline only lasts through X and Y and we haven't had a series follow the Pokemon League since 2016? It's a bit jarring. Another thing dragging down the episodes was, and I really hate to say this, Team Rocket. The fact that every single solitary episode unconditionally had to include Team Rocket in some way, and they always had to deliver their motto at least once an episode, and they almost always had to end up blasting off, and the fact that this went on for 4 regions of Pokemon is a very limiting and repetitive concept to implement. Now, I love Team Rocket, so I can maybe 80% forgive them for doing all that, but do they really need to be up to shenanigans almost every single episode? We saw that for situations like the gym battle against Surge or Trading Paris, or hell, most of the Pokemon League, Team Rocket could get involved with the plot without trying to do something nefarious. And yet we still have other episodes with an important gym battle going on. And now that I think about it, it's Team Rocket's fault that Erica gives Ash the badge for free because they started the fire. They also interfered with the gym battle against Misty, which again led to Ash getting the badge for free. And of course, once again, it's Team Rocket that leads to Ash getting the Earth Badge completely illegitimately. These interferences are just a lazy way to move Ash along because he's too incompetent to do it otherwise. I can't believe I just realized that Ash only made it to the Pokemon League because of Team Rocket. There's also plenty of instances where Team Rocket is shoehorned into an episode and do absolutely nothing. In the Sabrina rematch episode, they don't interact with the cast or the battle at hand and instead just end up in a hole that fills up with cement, which is horrifying to think about, but kids shows are often filled with horrific circumstances because I guess we want to encourage reckless behavior. Look, my point is that Team Rocket, as lovable as they are, should have been utilized better. One of the things I loved most about the Unova region in the anime, and there aren't many, is that Team Rocket stops being an episodic occurrence. From there, every episode we see them in is exciting and doesn't disappoint. And again, if you have to shove them into every episode, well then do something with them! Show us the setup for one of their dastardly plots in one episode and have them carry it out in the next episode if you're having trouble coming up with stuff. Maybe show us what Team Rocket is like away from the cast, how they interact with the rest of Team Rocket, where they get their money from, their goals and aspirations. And before you tell me, but quiz, they've done episodes where they show Team Rocket having lunch on their own or diving into their backstory. Yeah, those were the good episodes! What I'm saying is do more of that! If you've proven you can do it 5% of the time, then do that instead of the 25% of the time where they don't interact with Ash's group because that's how badly they screwed up their plan. If you put their underutilized nature aside, though, Team Rocket is great. They're very threatening in the first couple of episodes, though it doesn't take long for them to turn into comic relief, creating an episodely crisis to resolve. We actually get way more backstory on these three than we do for Ash's group. Most people probably remember Meowth's backstory as it served as the explanation for why it can walk and talk, which, by the way, I don't think anyone other than this guy ever questions the talking Meowth until after Johto. Jesse and James's journey to becoming evil is particularly interesting. Jesse grew up poor, and James James grew up rich, yet both had reasons to abandon their lives and join the evil organization. The fact the two got paired up on the same team is perfect. It's not like the other one ever criticizes or ridicules the other for living in a polar opposite world. They fully get each other, even if Jessie is a bit of an opportunist. For a trio of villains, they are surprisingly sympathetic towards each other, and many times other people. Honestly, I took a look at some of their antics and wonder why they go to such great lengths to be villains about it. Like the Moonstone in the Clefairy episode, just take the fucking Moonstone. Nobody has any real claims on it. Oh look, a wild Pokemon, let's catch it with a net. No, catch it with a Pokeball like a normal person. I swear, they try to dress up normal shit as evil and the other characters just eat it up. That said, Team Rocket proper is definitely like a real criminal organization. It's only Jessie and James that come off as tryhards to me. They kind of remind me of Chunibios who put on the act of an evil dark bad guy but are actually kind on the inside.
We could take the road, or risk our lives by climbing up the cliffs.
Well, we certainly can't take the road.
We have to climb up those cliffs.
'Cause we're the bad guys.
Oh my god, I just realized their motto even lines up with this.
To protect the world from devastation.
To unite all peoples within our nation.
To infect the world with devastation.
To blight all peoples in every nation.
To denounce the evils of truth and love.
To extend our reach to the stars above.
To denounce the goodness of truth and love.
To extend our wrath to the stars above.
Our Team Rocket is constantly declaring to make the world better. They're not evil, they're just misguided and foolish.
Act like you're trapped in a bubble.
I'm not a Mr. Mime. I just play one on TV. I'm out of here.
Opposite of Jessie and James, we have Misty and Brock acting as Ash's companions. Misty is the first and longest running female companion on the show, I think. She comes with a wide range of emotions from sweet and apathetic to raging and angry. In the Japanese version, she often introduced herself as an international beauty as a gimmick, which is probably due to an inferiority complex she has with her sisters. Now, Truth already made a whole video about Misty and the writing process behind making her work. For my take though, when I was a kid, I certainly looked at her and Ash as the very stereotypical love-hate romantic pairing. Reviewing this as an adult, however, I completely retract that opinion and see Misty for what she really is. A competent trainer traveling as the companion to the main character. Pretty much no different than Brock. However, while both companions, their use in group dynamics differ quite a bit. For the most part, Misty serves as the straight man to Ash's moments of stupidity. There are also times when the roles reverse, making her Ash's counter in pretty much any comedic scenes. Early on, we learn that Misty has bugophobia, which was a fun gag to give an otherwise steadfast character. However, to my recollection, that phobia only comes into play maybe half a dozen times in the whole series. I certainly don't remember it coming up more than once in the first season. Other than that, Misty doesn't really have much going for her. Unlike later characters, she doesn't get a character arc and her motivations are pretty uninteresting in my opinion. Yeah, it would be interesting to have trainers in the group that only focus on one type of Pokemon, but if that's your gimmick, then go try catching more water Pokemon. Despite her goal of being a great water Pokemon trainer, she makes a point of trying to catch an Oddish simply because she found it near the water. So she really doesn't come off as very serious with her life goal. Brock, on the other hand, is a lot more straightforward. He wants to be a Pokemon breeder, which in this case means the caretaking of Pokemon, sort of like a Pokemon health guide. He progresses this goal simply by traveling with Ash as the varying situations give him more experience in both helping Pokemon be healthy or by treating injuries. His flaw comes in the form of being girl crazy, which early on is often depicted as him being more shy and distracted. It isn't until later that he starts to get more vocal with his proclamations, prompting Misty to begin a trend of chastising Brock with the pulling of his ear. Otherwise, Brock's role in the group is to act as the mature and knowledgeable big brother of the trio. Though Misty also knows most of the shit Ash tends to be struggling to learn, Brock is usually the one doing the commentary on stuff like type advantage and strategy. When Ash and Misty are in dispute, Brock usually becomes the voice of reason to balance them out, kind of like Ben 10 when it comes to Alien X. This brings me to talk about some of the more minor characters. Gary, in particular, was someone I had completely forgotten was actually in the first season as much as he was. It was honestly a treat anytime he did show up because the sassy ridicule of Ash is usually well deserved. While normally a jerk, Gary often displays a level of competence for Pokemon training that Ash just doesn't have and won't develop for a long time. For example, in the Diglett episode, Gary is the first to explain that Diglett are not bugs and notes how fast they are at pulling in and out of the ground.
Technically, Diglett is not a bug Pokemon. Diglett can pull their heads in at 186,282 miles per second.
What's that?
The speed of light.
Like, he's very book smart about Pokemon. It's honestly what makes him such a great rival to Ash, because Gary lacks the thing that Ash excels at, which is an emotional attachment, trust, and empathy for Pokemon. Nurse Joy, was around. She was okay, nothing to really complain about. Oh, but Officer Jenny? Oh boy, do I ever have a bunch of shit to say about Officer Jenny. She is one of the most incompetent characters in the goddamn show. I am not joking. It's not like I'm a cop hater either. This is actual hatred of the stupidity in her actions. She barely knows how to do her job and often relies on the kids to help her do it. Let's take a look at a few Jenny moments, shall we?
None of the victims are going to press charges since they all got their Pokemon back.
Yeah, right. I bet you just didn't want to do the paperwork, you lazy dick.
I want you to place that woman under house arrest!
Only Officer Jenny could get herself captured by her own training dogs.
Let us out! We're not the crooks!
Those two at that breeding center are the criminals!
If you're trying to win sympathy, it won't work. The judge is gonna throw the book at you Pokemon snatchers.
No, Jenny! Fucking hate this character so much!
They tricked me?
Yes, they tricked you! Apparently it's not that hard, you useless incompetent cop! At the Pokemon League, Team Rocket yaps away at the mic and 4 Jennies need to tackle and detain them. Only for them to be fine like a scene later. 4 Jennies, every single one of them useless. Even if you include that scene though, I'm pretty sure Jenny has tried to arrest Ash's group more often than Team Rocket. Because that is how infuriatingly incompetent she is. Everyone knows it's true, which is why in the Dark City episode, it's not Officer Jenny who shows up to handle the legal aspects of the situation. It's the fucking nurse. Now there are too many characters in Pokemon to actually dive into, so I'll stop there. The number of times we see a one-off character saying something along the lines of, "We'll meet again!" Mildly infuriating. I would, however, like to briefly talk about the Pokemon themselves. Of all the Pokemon, Ash's party stands out the most as having individual personalities. Pikachu comes off as stubborn, which can lead to it acting against Ash at times, but also means vibing with Ash when it comes to battle. I realized early on that Pikachu is rather nerfed for most of the season. It's supposedly extremely powerful, but when it comes to battles, there's usually a reason to take it out of the action, or it's just disadvantaged in some way. This is fine though. If they didn't remove Pikachu from the conflicts, the resolutions would be too easy given its previously demonstrated strength. Caterpie had an interesting arc going, but immediately stopped being interesting once it evolved into Butterfree. Bulbasaur is a protective older brother, Squirtle is a brat and a troublemaker, and Charmander comes with some attitude problems. I'm not sure what caused it to turn into a jackass upon evolution, but given it was the only Pokemon to survive Primeape's attacks and actually lead to ultimately catching Primeape, I'm gonna say that Charmander is probably a much higher level than Ash's other Pokemon, barring Pikachu. You know what? I figured it out. It's not that Ash didn't have enough badges, it's that Charizard knows that most of the badges he did get weren't earned, they were gifted. To think this match against Richie could have played out differently if he just got his badges the normal way. I would talk about Primeape next, but somebody already spent enough time on that. Pidgeotto is a terrible Pokemon, despite being a core part of Ash's team and has no real personality, and guys, Pidgeotto loses almost every major battle it fights in. The rest of the Pokemon, they're fine. I think Togepi and Psyduck are the only ones that actually come with personalities. Those personalities being baby and mentally ill child. Misty would make for a caring mom. No, but the rest of her Pokemon, along with all of Brock's, are without any personality. It's also shocking how underutilized some of them tend to be. Like, Brock has a giant rock snake that could out so many problems. Misty, on the other hand, has both a Staryu and a Starmie. Guess which one wins more? Staryu. It's the Staryu. Team Rocket's not much better, save for Victory Bell, which hasn't actually established the long-running gag of eating James yet. Really, I guess it's just a starter Pokemon that ended up with some kind of semblance of their own characters. I guess it's hard to when Pokemon don't have the ability to talk like a Meowth. I am looking forward to later seasons where almost every Pokemon in the main cast feels like its own character, not just one of the many identical copies of its own species. With that, I've pretty much given all my thoughts on the Pokemon's first season, its ups and downs, its story, its characters, but I feel like I'm missing something.
Get yourself a new life!
Alright, I guess I could talk about Ash too. As the main character, he is the one we see the most of in the show. He owns a passion for all things Pokemon, is pretty friendly with most people, and is actually really good at wisecracks.
Bugs are one of the 3 most disgusting things in the world!
Aside from you, what are the other disgusting things?
That said, looking back on it, we ended up learning very little about him. Just like his video game counterpart, Ash almost seems to spontaneously blop into existence just as the show begins. He has no backstory to speak of, his motivations are developed on the spot, and worst of all, despite being very clearly into Pokemon training, Ash knows jack shit about Pokemon. Am I the only one who finds that strange? We're introduced to Ash as this kid who is determined to be a Pokemon master, how he's so excited to get his first Pokemon, and and that he's about to go on his adventure across the country. And yet in the same episode, Ash demonstrates that he does not know how catching Pokemon works, and he doesn't seem to know the names of any Pokemon beyond the 3 starters. It gets worse. In later episodes, it becomes clear that he doesn't understand basic type matchups like bug versus bird. He didn't know about the 6 Pokemon limit. He'll dex the same Pokemon twice. And I would be doing myself a disservice if I didn't mention again that Ash was gifted most of his badges. That said, this also leads into one of the many good qualities Ash possesses. Most of the time Ash got gifted a badge, it was because he went out of his way to do something meaningful for the people involved. Ash is pretty much always ready to help someone at the drop of a hat. This goes for his companions as well. I cannot count the number of times these kids saw an adult having adult problems and just dropped what they were doing to go deal with that shit. The missing hypnotized kids, the Ponyta race, the Porygon computer virus, the Snorlax blocking the water flow, Dark City's gym feud, Melvin the Magician's shitty magic act, Paris's evolution, Jigglypuff's singing voice, the normal-ass hospital that needs to treat Pokemon, Clefairy that are stealing people's shit, the circus that needs a Mr. Mime, some director that wants to film a movie, a Japanese samurai with 2 Japanese names lost his badges. My point is that for all his incompetencies and occasional attitude, Ash is a good-natured kid. He has a strong sense of justice without being overly demanding. He generally wants to get along with everyone, but isn't afraid to push back when people give him the snark. Even Team Rocket, who are regionally wide known criminals, sometimes end up relying on Ash to help them with something. And he'll do it simply because they need help. He'll help actual villains, and do it without any naivety that they won't try to pull some shady trick before their alliance is up. To that extent, he's a very pragmatic person. That begins and ends with how he behaves socially. He is still a dipshit when it comes to being a Pokemon trainer. I'm not taking that part back. His go-to strategy early on is to yell dodge, counter, or simply attack. Not even naming an attack move, just yelling attack and hoping his Pokemon will figure out the best course of action. To my surprise, however, by the end of the season, Ash actually does show to have learned some basics of Pokemon battling. May have taken until the Pokemon League itself, but we finally see Ash thinking about type advantages in advance, which Pokemon will work best in the situation, and coming up with ideas like using the melting of ice against Arcanine in his 3rd round. It's not much, but Ash does see some growth in the first series. Granted, for a serialized show like this, we aren't really expecting to see many characters develop moments in one season. Most of Ash's character-defining moments are usually about him giving up one of his Pokemon. I know it doesn't happen often, but it seems like every time Ash finds a wild cult group of one of his Pokemon, his first instinct is to release it into the wild. When you really think about it though, why? That'd be like if I was walking my dog at night and we happened upon a pack of wolves, I suddenly decide to leave my dog to join the wolves. Like, that's just objectively not a good decision, no matter how you look at it. One big character moment stands out to me for Ash. As the Pokemon League is kicking off, Gary and Ash exchange some words about how to be a good Pokemon trainer going into the tournament. This talk leads to Ash leaving in the middle of the night to check out the Pokemon Stadium. Now, a reminder to those watching that this was the first Pokemon League, and therefore at the time we figured it would be the only Pokemon League. Ash standing at the edge to take in the scene of the stadium, no words, just feeling it and remembering everything that led up to this moment for him. That is a really nice character moment to me, as it almost seems to hit Ash and us watching that we're finally here. It builds up the grandeur of the next 6 episodes. We go into the tournament thinking Ash is the main character, of course he'll win, and then the series will end or something to that effect. But Ash doesn't win, and there's good narrative reason for him not to. Ash spent most of his journey picking up easy wins, gaining Pokemon purely on emotional merit and not because he was a good trainer. He flies through a lot of his matches without really planning or training. With the Pokemon League was finally coming up, Ash spent most of his time messing around and not doing any actual prep work. He then relied on a single Pokemon to carry through his first league match. And he won, I won't deny that Ash pulled it off, but he continued to rely on the idea that things would just work out if he tried hard enough. And then when his match against Richie came up, Ash's luck finally ran out. Ash gets delayed by Team Rocket, eventually gets made to compete in the match while both he and his major players are exhausted just trying to get him there. He has the added pressure of almost missing his match, added pressure that it's against his friend Richie, and is finally forced to make an extremely risky yet almost only viable play in sending out Charizard. This domino of events causes Ash to lose his match. Would things have turned out differently if Ash hadn't relied on luck and faith? Definitely. He had ample time to train his Pokemon and learn some new strategies. Heck, he didn't even need to bring Charizard to this match. He had 2 other Pokemon he could have swapped for it. Ash already knew things were getting tough. He had just seen Gary lose his round 4 match, and Gary was supposed to be Ash's rival. And if you think that I am even slightly being too hard on Ash for screwing around too much and not putting in even a little effort here, Oak parades Ash for the same shit.
Maybe you could have gone much further if you hadn't been so sure of yourself and you trained your Charizard properly.
Pokemon's Kanto League seasons were a lot more interesting on the rewatch than I expected. Given the behind-the-scenes production issues, it sounds like a miracle that the anime didn't flop halfway through. I definitely hold a lot of different opinions now than I did when first watching the show. Team Rocket is a lot deeper to me now, narratively speaking, and Misty is a lot less deeper to me. Can't fucking stand Jenny anymore. The pacing was crazy to say the least, but I have a better idea of why it was so whiplashy. And although it's possibly unintentionally written this way, I ended up really enjoying the aspect of building up the journey of a boy who got by on a lot of luck and earnest deeds but little strategy or work, leading to it all catching up to him at the end and causing a very significant and memorable loss. It is very much the first stepping stone in a long road of Ash becoming the champion we all wished for him to be, one that is immediately undercut by the next bit with the Orange League. But we'll pretend that didn't happen because, well, anime certainly did, otherwise the Alolan Cup wouldn't have meant that much. Regardless, the Orange Islands is next on my list of deep dives. Hope to see you all in the next frame by frame. Bye, Anara!